What's the strangest thing a junkie tried to trade to get their fix? Someone offered me their dog for a $50 bag. They were such a crappy person and a terrible dog owner. You'd better believe I took that frickin' dog and we had 8 glorious years together. Don't tell my current dog, but that was the most caring dog I've ever met. I miss the big guy every day. My friend would sell his boss, Green Herb, and then was paid through his paycheck. He thought it was a great deal until I explained that now he was paying income tax on his sales. I mean, you don't want to tangle with the IRS about money you got from selling substances. They don't care how you got the money, they want their taxes. I had a kid write me an essay for To Kill a Mockingbird in high school for an 8th. I got an A and I gave him an extra bag for it. And no, I was not the teacher. My old dealer got his leaky roof fixed by a roofing crew that he'd sold some smack to. In my younger days, before being a parent, I sold Green Herb and ended up fronting a lot out, and then when the people couldn't pay me, they'd give me iPads, expensive glass pipes, knives, and one time almost a gat, but I didn't know if that was stolen, so I declined. I accepted almost anything that I thought was useful or cool. The strangest thing I got was a $1 t-shirt. It was just $1, but it was folded into a tiny shirt, and I thought it was cute, so the kid basically got a gram for $1. I still have it too. Life pro tip: learn origami to impress your substance dealer so they'll give you a good deal. This was in the 90s. A school near me was going through some major renovations. They were practically going to be built again from the ground up. Anyways, a district administrator tried to trade one of those big outdoor school signs for some white snow. Former dealer here, I used to do it so I could afford to eat while at uni. I once had somebody offer to invite me to Christmas dinner in exchange for a baggie. I said yes, and I got to enjoy Christmas with him and his family while blazed out of our minds. It was an awesome experience, and since I couldn't afford the trip home for Christmas, it turned what would have been a depressing day into one of my all-time favorite memories. You know, there are far more weirdly wholesome stories so far than the narrator might have guessed. I guess that the Green Herb dealers are a fair bit more mellow than most of the others, as the trades are also a bit lower stakes as well. I don't see this kind of deal going down in Breaking Bad. I know a dude who traded his trumpet for some white snow.
That is so incredibly sad. A trumpet won't get you very much.
Yeah, but if you want a lot, you'd sell a woodwind. Brass instruments are sold for alcohol so you can get a nice buzz. I had a friend begging me to bring something over to him. When I asked about payment, he said he'd found something better than money and that I'd be pleased with it. He wouldn't say what it was, but made it sound like it wasn't safe to mention over the phone. From the way he was taking it so seriously, it sounded extremely hush-hush, and I was just intrigued. It ended up being like a total of $9 across 3 gift cards, a 2-megapixel digital camera, and an old phone that was missing the battery. He said the digital camera could be sold at a pawn shop, the phone could be used to hide substances until I got a battery for it, and the gift cards were just something extra that he felt like throwing in to sweeten the deal. I also had an incident where a friend of mine needed to buy, and I decided to hit up my Connect to pick up on their behalf. The friend picks me up, drives me to the dealer's house, and I ask them for money before I head inside. They reach behind the seat and pull out a Ziploc bag full of pennies and were like, "Trust me, it's all there." For clarification, we were just buying Green Herb, but it was before California allowed recreational shops, so only a handful of people had access to it in my area. And I didn't take the pennies to the dealer. I had enough to front my friend, so I paid for it and kept the bag. The amount of coins did end up being the exact amount needed, though. I traded PB&J for the devil's lettuce once. My dealer was hungry, and I had a packed lunch. I used to hang with an older lady. She was a smackhead. I once saw her dealer offer her a 50 slab for some macaroni jewelry her daughter made for her. She didn't do it. Good for her. Well, she's not a true smackhead then, just a nice old lady who does some smack. Not a dealer myself, but my dealer friend once came into the kitchen of the restaurant while I was chopping celery or something, and he was dragging a huge black garbage bag behind him. He'd already been to prison once and just got back out apparently. I said, "George, is that a frickin' body?" He goes, "Frick yeah, it is." I gripped the knife a little tighter at that point and looked for the exit. He pulled the garbage bag back and he had 3 huge Alaskan salmon in there. Some guy didn't have enough cash, so he'd paid him in salmon. I gutted them, cleaned them, and George paid me in salmon. It was good salmon. A friend of mine used to sling various substances while he was in college, mostly Mary J and hallucinogenic fungi, but he dabbled in selling the harder stuff here and there. He said some guy offered to live with him as a personal down-under kiss distributor for a week in exchange for some exorbitant amount of white snow. Something like 2 ounces for being an on-tap eggplant servicing machine for a week. My friend didn't even have that much white snow at the time. The most he ever had at a single time was like 20 grams, and he only sold it when he came across it for a stupid cheap price and during spring break when all of the hardcore college partiers were going on spring or summer break. He turned down this wannabe employee's kind offer. Smackheads be like, yeah, I've got a washing machine door. When I was in middle school, someone stole their grandpa's World War II souvenirs to trade for Mary J. A friend of mine traded him $30 worth of wacky tobacco for a 1941 Third Reich youth dagger recovered from one of his grandpa's kills. The strangest? I've been offered down-under kisses by both genders, every gift card you can imagine, an iguana, pizza, Jimmy John's, $100 bar tab, computers, and iPads. I guess it's not that strange, but I feel like I should say I've never accepted any bedroom favors or iguanas. How much for the bag?
I'd say it's about 1 iguana.
Back in the 90s, when I was selling a lot of crystal and molly at raves, I had one guy offer me a gold wedding band for a baggie. I took it and noticed some Cyrillic writing on the inside. I took it to a pawn shop I knew that had a Russian owner, and he told me it was from a family in Russia that was very connected to the royal family that was murdered during the revolution. I knew the kid and his parents, and I knew that he'd stolen it from his mother, who was a child of refugees from the revolution, so I just stuck it in an envelope and mailed it back to them. In college, I had a buddy whose house we'd always hang out at. He sold all sorts of stuff. The best offer he ever got was from this 50-year-old lifelong junkie woman. She was a landscaper in her better days, and once she ran out of money, she started offering my friend plants. He rolled with it, and a few months later, he had a beautiful garden in his backyard. She even dug a pond and made a koi pond for him. Pretty good deal for both parties involved, and a win for us friends too, because we got to chill and smoke in an awesome backyard. I'm not a dealer or user anymore, but someone offered to trade a box of used children's clothes, a laptop charger, and a single Nike shoe. So whatever was sitting in the car, they just broke into, I guess. A punch card to a local sandwich shop that had 9 punches and just needed 1 more for a free sub. In a darker period in my life, someone once offered to sign the title of their car over to me for a week. I had people wanting to give me gift cards for half its value. People offering to buy me things from Amazon for half. Coin collectors, jewelry that a magnet wouldn't stick to, used tires and rims, lottery tickets, their girlfriends for one night, but my favorite was a promissory note. Screw all of that. I'm so happy I'm clean now. I don't have to live like that anymore.
Coin collections? Man, this is such a sore spot for me. Relatives have stolen almost all of my collectible currency and coins for smack over the years. Like, I want to ask them, hey, jerks, what did the 1926 Mercury dime my grandpa gave me buy ya?
Oof. I mean, some coins can be worth thousands, right? That sucks. I'd say we're like 50-50 here on the offers being way too generous for what they were getting and half being complete garbage. The one that sticks out to me so far, though, was that Nike shoe. That was a missed opportunity. Not a dealer, but once I found a bag of green herb in the high school parking lot, and some kids I was with said,
I'll give you my Xbox 360 with the games for that.
Yeah dude, sure. I was gonna throw it away anyway. And that's how I got my first gaming console. My parents asked where I got it, and I told them the truth, and they were like, I mean, sure? So if I remember correctly, I got home at like 11 p.m., walked into my house with it, and my dad was awake, so he asked where I got it. And I told him I found a bag of the devil's lettuce at the basketball game, and this kid Brian said he'd give me his Xbox and games for it. My dad said something like, so you traded free Mary J for an Xbox? Yeah, he had his Xbox in his trunk because he was going to his dad's this week. The next morning, my mum said, so I heard you had a trade with Brian last night. Yeah, can you buy me a live membership? Well, what do Brian's parents think of this? His new stepdad buys him one every month.
Really?
Yeah. Also, the bag was about 2 grams. I dealt small amounts of various substances in addition to tending bar while in college. One of the Mexican kitchen guys wanted a bunch of molly at about $350, and I obtained it for him. When it came time to pay up, he said he only had about $100, but he'd get the rest to me in a week or so. I was having a Super Bowl party that I'd invited everyone to, and a few days later he asks if he could work off the balance by catering the event. I agreed and assumed he'd flake, but homeboy showed up 30 minutes early with some of the most fire Tex-Mex food imaginable. Trays upon trays of everything you could think of. It was unreal and probably cost him more than he owed me. It was a big reason we served Tex-Mex at my wedding, because I knew a guy who could throw down. His catering company did a great job that day, but he did an even better job as one of my groomsmen. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I traded a textbook from class I took to my dealer for green herb when I was in college. He was going to be taking the class next semester, so it was a win-win for both of us. I once traded a crap ton of Adderall for a GTX 1070 graphics card. Former: bags of cans, bedroom favors, stolen RX, electronics, bikes, car parts, trendy toys, stuff like that. The weirdest thing I ever actually took in a trade? Adult movies. Substances are bad, kids. I had someone else's food stamp card for about a year and a half. I got $120 each month, which I'd usually spend on steak and seafood. He got a quarter-ounce Mary J. I was happy with the arrangement. My friend in high school got expelled but kept coming back to deliver the devil's lettuce. He was never stopped because teachers were his clients. He ended up doing the deed with one of the student teachers for a bag. Only reason I know is that she came over while we were playing Tony Hawk and not so sneakily did their thing while I waited in the kitchen. High school was weird, man. I had a neighbor who dealt devil's lettuce and probably other harder things, but I don't know. He was a weird guy, not a bad person, but definitely not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He accumulated a lot of random stuff because people were always offering him it in trade. The big ones were mostly electronics, like a nice TV and consoles, but random things too, like paintings and tools and furniture. His house looked a little like a really nice resale shop before his girlfriend put her foot down. Last I heard, he got arrested for felony possession while out drinking. When I was in university, I was always surprised at the number of girls who'd give you a down-under kiss or go even further for a dub sack, which is $20 worth. Ex-user here. My dealer would only give me the stuff if I gave him my blades and allowed him to check for any cuts. I was in a seriously dark time and he helped me in a lot of ways. Eventually, once I started to get better, he refused to sell me any stuff and also made it clear to his friend dealers that I was blacklisted. One of the main reasons I turned my life around. Not a dealer of that kind of plant, but a guy tried to pay me for fixing his computer with tomatoes. Might not sound that weird, but the bill was $120, which I think would have worked out to several hundred tomatoes. My little brother and I would walk our green tomatoes that fell off the plants over to the local pizza place. They used it for sauce or sometimes would bring eggplant or zucchini and they'd give us a pizza to take home. For over a decade, I had a grass-for-grass deal with my guy. I cut his grass once a week for a couple of grams. He just really hated mowing the lawn. My herb dealer has asked me a few really weird favors in exchange for green herb. Every time he always asks, "Mate, I've got a proposal for you." He asked me if I had any duty-free tobacco that I could give him in exchange for his wacky tobacco, because he thinks UK tobacco duty is too high and he refuses to pay it. He's asked me if I had any alcohol I'd exchange for devil's lettuce after the shops stopped selling at 10. I actually did this and got a cigarette's worth for a shot of amaretto. I gave him a lift in my car around the corner from his house to pick up some Valium, and he gave me a gram of Mary J. He's totally harmless though, he's a good guy and sometimes he has quite good chat, so I don't mind doing it. It's weird because these requests are always like at midnight until about 2 in the morning. Probably worth mentioning as well, after I swapped him for a shot of amaretto for the cigarette's worth, he messaged me on Facebook about 2.5 hours later, asking me if I had any coke-adamol I'd swap him for his herbal medley. Unfortunately, I was in my bed, so I couldn't, or I would have done it. When my friends and I went to pick up $10 worth of herbaceous smokables, we were broke high schoolers, we got 2 Little Caesars pizzas before we went to our dealer. We ate about half the pizza, waiting for our dealer to come out, and when he did, he jumped into the back seat where the pizza was. He saw the pizza and got real excited and said, "Y'all got pizza?" with his eyes wide on the box. My friend told him, "Yeah, we'll give you the rest for $20 worth." He said yes and gave us the grass and took the pizza. So we got $10 worth of extra juicy compost for $3 worth of pizza. I said it earlier and I will repeat. People who trade in green inhalable hemp are just not that bad, are they? I was expecting a whole lot more misery in this recording, and although there are a couple of absolute junkies, most of these people who want the herb just have the munchies or their big children afterwards. Someone else's stolen Christmas presents. We made him put them back. Possibly off topic, but same ballpark. I gave a coworker a ride home once and he asked me to hold my hand out. I thought he was going to drop me a $5 bill or something. Instead, he placed the smallest nugget of green herb I've ever seen in my life in my hand. I tried not to laugh, and I don't even think I said thanks. I just nodded and smiled. Pretty sure if I tried to light it on fire in a bowl, it would have turned to ash before the smoke made it to my mouth. A cat for 3 Xanax bars. The cat was covered in fleas and super young. I took the deal because I felt bad for the cat, and I wouldn't trade this cat for $1 million. We've had 4 amazing years together. He's pulled babes for me, he acts like a dog, sleeps on his back and follows me around the house. Best deal ever. I love my kitty. A herb grinder and a DVD of Nightmare on Elm Street. Once I gave a guy the rest of my green herb for a really sweet magic card. It was Hate Flayer. That's still my favorite card. I sold Ritalin. Disregarding the 6th commandment for dealers, I took IOUs, and my friend paid me $3 of the $5 he owed me in penny rolls. Had a guy who'd pay me in turtles, like those miniature red slider turtles you get at fairs and carnivals. The first time I was cool with it. He knew I loved reptiles and I'd wanted a new pet ever since my bearded dragon died. Rest in peace, Shlomo. Anyway, this guy would sometimes pay me actual money, but every once in a while he'd claim he really needed a dime or something small, but didn't have the money, so he'd opt to pay me in turtles instead. Now, by all means, I love animals, but I am running a business here. I can't feed myself with turtles, they're too small to even eat if I wanted to. But strangely enough, I've accepted the payments. 3 months later and this guy is buying in bulk, which is great for me, because holding less equals more money. But this frickin' guy was matching what he was buying in turtle weight. After the first couple of times, I got kinda scared because I thought, where the frick is this man getting these turtles? Mind you, I am from the Northeast, we aren't really known for our reptile population. So here I am accepting turtle over fist, trying to save each of these turtles because I suspect that the guy is somehow acquiring these animals through illegal methods. Long story short, the guy got arrested on exotic animal charges and did 10 to 25 years in state maximum. I thought I was the criminal, but this frickin' dude was the kingpin of reptiles. Unbelievable. I have a pretty ideal symbiotic arrangement with my main supplier. Buddy likes to garden, eat fish, and drink beer. I like to brew beer, catch fish, and smoke bud. Rigged up a little shed with ventilation that directs CO2 from fermentation into his greenhouse. Spent grain from the brews and waste from the fish is used for compost. No money changes hands, rewards reaped by all. I used to sell herbal refreshments in college. Nothing major. I had about 12 clients, but the money was good enough that I never had to buy my own stuff, so it worked out. One day I came home from my comprehensive exams in sociology. It was the only time where I didn't know if I'd passed or failed the test. I was stressed, to say the least. So I twisted up a J, and boom, the munchies hit me like crazy. Like, I need food. There's a knock at my door. Some chemical engineering guy brought me a frickin' vat of chili. Like it was at least 10 gallons we're talking. All he wanted was an eighth, which was $35. I gave him that, and the chili was so good that I tracked him down and gave him another. I once traded someone a single-strength Tylenol for their baggie of white snow. I guess their hangover really felt that bad, but it's still an anecdote I tell because who the frick does that? Actually, she asked me for Tylenol, but all I had was a single generic ibuprofen, which she didn't even look at. She just threw it back as soon as it touched her hand and put the baggie in my hands, and that was that. I had a good time on it, and that was the only time I ever bought fun dust. I was at Marley Fest in Austin, Texas, a reggae festival where people smoke the good stuff openly and some of them sell. So I was waiting in line, which was kind of long, waiting for lemonade. I guess everyone had cotton mouth. While waiting, this visibly intoxicated man said to the gentleman standing in front of me, "Bro, if you buy me a lemonade, I'll give you a hit of A." With such an offer, I assumed they knew each other. The guy in front of me declines the offer, and the offering guy, without missing a beat, extends his offer to anyone else in the line. "If anyone buys me a lemonade, I'll give you a hit of this." My assumption of the two guys knowing each other vanished in an instant, and it became clear this guy was actually really tripping and really, really thirsty. My dealer hooks me up with enough green herb until I get back on my feet if I show up with produce from the farmer's market that happens on Sundays near my house. He's a hippie vegan and loves making fresh squeezed juice, but works on the days the farmer's market is on. I love going to the farmer's market. I love trading carrots, oranges, and beets for ganja. I love rolling one while I wait for my dealer to make me a frickin' freshly squeezed juice. Win, win, win. The stuff is legal in California, but until a dispensary offers fresh squeezed juice and J while they get me my stuff, I'll stay loyal to my bud and my buddy.
Cruise ship / hotel workers of Reddit. What is something you aren't allowed to tell us? Odds are someone died on your cruise. Think about all the old folks you see get onto the boat. For a lot of them, this is their retirement home, and cheaper than a lot of other retirement homes. They are literally taking cruises until they die, and we eventually find them in their cabins. Get a free fridge in your room. Say it is a medical need for medication. HIPAA laws mean they can't pressure details out of you. May not work for smaller motels / hotels, but should for most larger hotels or cruises. Vegas hotel worker here. It works. If it's not for meds, I'm supposed to charge you, but I don't, because I don't get paid enough. May use this in the future. I am diabetic and am supposed to keep insulin refrigerated. I currently work as a housekeeper for seasonal / summer. People leave anything and everything behind. Forget your curling iron? We probably have one. Need a charger? Yep. Toys for your child? You got it. If you ask while we're in between rooms or cleaning a common area, we'd love to help you out. No one really asks. These occurrences / policies may not be the case at every hotel. The staff on most all cruise lines are not trained nearly well enough to handle an abandoned ship situation. It will be chaos if it were to happen on a large vessel. The safety briefing you go to is just theater, and we want to be there even less than you do. Norovirus is way more common on ships than you would think. Security staff on ships are poorly equipped to handle a major security breach like an active shooter situation. The words bright star over the PA indicates a medical emergency is happening and is a page for medical staff to respond. The captain earns bonuses for saving fuel. Leaving port early or arriving late means the ship can go slower and conserve fuel, which means more money for the captain. Hotel worker here also. When you bring your children to our hotel for sporting events, baseball tourneys, etc., we really hate you more than them because you get drunk and ignore them while they tear our hotel apart. Take care of your kids, people! I worked for a fancy restaurant in a tourist town that catered to cruise line passengers looking to get away from the ships. Our desserts were frozen and shipped to us from a company named Gourmet Chefs. So when you read the menu description and we say that all of our desserts are prepared by gourmet chefs, we aren't lying. They were just reheated and prepared by a high school kid making $3 an hour. Hotel worker here. Ask for everything you need. It will be provided. Also, complain about every problem you see. You won't believe the amount of free stuff complainers get. It's awful. And never forget to tip your bellboy. I don't exactly agree with complaining about every problem you see. That sounds like a great way to exploit some stuff. At the Fairfield Inns and Suites, they're only supposed to comp you one room. I found a used condom, crap in the bathtub, and a handgun in my room. They comped me 2 weeks worth of rooms. I did not keep the gun. I worked at the front desk of a decent hotel for a year. We had all sorts of stuff to give to guests if they needed it. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, razors, sewing kits, whatever. But we also had huge boxes of tampons in the back. Like, probably more tampons than a single person could consume in a lifetime. And yet they were by far the rarest thing guests asked for. Maybe because I'm male, but still, if I was a girl, I'd be all over that. Oh, buddy. Oh, you sweet summer child. You have no idea how many boxes of tampons girls go through. This was 7 years ago, so policies might have changed since then. Ex-hotel employee here. If you ever need to cancel a hotel reservation, but it's already past the cancellation deadline, just call and move your reservation up a few days. Wait 5 minutes. Call back, now well within the cancellation window, and cancel your stay for free. Hotel worker here. I wouldn't do it. I would get in hot water. The next shift, however, would have no way of knowing when your reservation was changed and would absolutely cancel it for you. I worked as an improv actor on a cruise once for 6 months. What we don't tell you is, half the show is scripted. We just tie in your suggestions. User Pixie Alex had some great insights onto what goes on below the decks on a cruise ship the last time this was asked. I'm a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white-hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all heck is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members doing it, smoking and drinking. Our beers are $1. No drugs or spirits though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo? Yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the Happy Couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise, and the one before that, and the one before that. We are not allowed to screw the passengers, but we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to die. And no, I do not know where Jack/Rose is. They're not real people. Hotel worker here. Worked evenings and overnights for a few years now. This all doesn't apply to all hotels, but many. A lot of these will depend on how you treat the staff. Chargers are the #1 most forgotten item. We have tons of them. If you are nice and ask where you can buy one, we will offer one. I don't care who you're banging in your room. And no, I don't know where to find hookers. Well, I do, but I'm staying out of that. We know what's good to eat. We also know where you will get sick from eating. Sometimes it's both, and I'll warn you. The pizza guy tells me if you stiff him on the tip. If you're an awful person, I'm less inclined to go out of my way to help you. I will not disclose whether you're here or not, but if the wife spotted your truck in the lot, you're still screwed. Use the safe for valuables. Most housekeepers are trustworthy, but are humans that are around your valuables. I can give you a discount. We have a little leeway with the price of your room. If we're not booked, I can knock off some cost. If we have one room left, I can also jack up the price, and my bosses will reward me for it. I have also jacked the price up just because I don't like someone. Had some tweakers come in. Every time they asked the price again, I raised it $10. They ended up paying $130 for a $90 room. Food quality varies. Don't expect gourmet meals. We only have a microwave and an oven. The eggs are from a box, but are still real eggs. Muffins are like the ones that come in tubes. Gravy is powdered mix. Everything is Cisco, so it's not bad, but it's not great. Be wary if you see a Smart and Final truck outside. Their quality is garbage. I can't always fix a noise complaint. If it's the people directly above you with kids running around, I can get them to stop. If it's some loud intimacy and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from, you're going to have to wait it out. If you leave change out after leaving for the day, housekeepers assume it's a tip. Don't complain when 70 cents is missing from your room. I will tolerate your crap, but only to a point. You could be rude, but if you get abusive, name-calling, making a scene, etc., that's over the line. Yes, I can kick you out. No, you won't get me fired. Yes, I will call the cops. No, there was no one else in town to stay on a Friday night. Yes, I'm still going to charge you for the first night. Cancellation policy, especially if I can't sell the room again. We have everything you may have forgotten. Toothbrush, razors, sewing needles and thread, deodorant, etc. Just ask. If we're booked, I will tell you so. Asking again will not magically make a room open up. We will call you a cab, but you dang well better be ready. The cab drivers have no patience for tourists. They know you're not long-term business. If you do drugs in the room, keep it quiet and don't do anything that requires smoking in the room. We will call the cops and they will arrest you. The cops are our buddies. I'm in a small town and I'm on a first-name basis with them. We are a huge revenue stream for the city. If I call them, they're usually here before I hang up. They will always side with us. A night in a cell for trespassing is not fun. As an aside, they don't bother me at drunk checkpoints, so that's nice. Don't steal from the room. We will bill you for it. It will cost more than you expect. If you damage something, come clean. If it's something the maintenance dude can fix, we'll probably just bill you for supplies and an hour of his time. If you try and hide it, we'll bill you contractor rate. If something was damaged when you get in, let us know right away in case we missed something from the last guest. Always inspect your room as soon as you check in for this reason. People do die here. About half are old people that die of being old. The other half are people that check in to check out. It's a really messed up thing to do to the housekeepers. The housekeepers here are kind of superstitious and do not like going into rooms that people have died in. It's kind of weird knowing I'm the last person that someone talked to. Tip number 1. If you're going to screw around on your spouse, use an assumed name. The front desk agent will probably be cool and not ask too many questions a $20 bill doesn't answer. I had a guy come in and say he lost his room key and forgot his room number. I asked for his ID and it matched the last name on my ledger. Gave him a key with the number. That was protocol. Turns out, he was there to catch his wife in the act. Tip number 2, always use that second arm lock, though some hotel staff have a tool to disable that as well. Hotels sometimes overbook rooms, typically more so in the summer since that's a busy season. They're relying on some people either canceling or not showing up. Always a good idea to call and confirm your reservation on the day of arrival, especially if you're going to be late. Yay, I can finally answer this. I work at an upscale resort. Nights average $500 a night. I work in the entertainment department, meaning we help with both the daycare center and with large groups in-house that companies host. I will say that our child daycare is pretty safe. The only sketchy thing I would say is that we will always tell you that your kid has a good time, regardless if they have been crying up until just before you got there. Parents leave their numbers with us to call if the kid wants to go home, but whenever a kid complains that they want to go home, we do everything in our power to make sure that they stay. Because money. Also, the in-group activities that we do, biking, hiking, etc., are sometimes made up on the spot, since the entertainment department decided not to properly train us in all of our offered activities. Newer staff, generally the people that only work summers, are told the morning of that they're running a certain activity and given a really vague rundown of how it's supposed to go and told to do their best to make stuff up but make sure it sounds good. Companies pay thousands of dollars for these activities, but I can assure you the thought that goes into these activities is essentially zero. AmITheA here. I worked in numerous luxury 5-star properties worldwide. You will be shocked if you know the food quality in buffets. I've seen yellow food coloring added and labeled as saffron sauce. Pan-fried sea bass? It's pan-fried whitefish that comes in generic bags labeled whitefish. People change the expiration date on stuff so that the food cost doesn't increase. The amount of frozen foods sold and labeled as fresh is astounding. A la carte food tends to have much better quality. I'm a front desk manager at a hotel. I want to jump in and say something before this gets real big. When this kind of thread pops up, someone always says that the front desk GSA can upgrade or change rates for a guest if the guest is nice to them or tips them. While this may happen sometimes, it's not common. If one of my employees gave someone a cheapo rate, he has to explain why. It'll come up in our reports. That being said, hotels are a ton of fun. I can't think of any big secrets, but I will say this. If you have any questions or requests, no matter how stupid or weird, let the staff know. We love to help people. That's why we went into the industry. And it makes it a lot better for both the guest and the staff when we can help you while you're still in the hotel and not when you're calling corporate after checkout to complain. I've worked at a few independent hotels in a couple tourist towns. A few things. Ask about places to eat. I know there's a Wendy's across the street or the center of town has lots of nice-looking restaurants, but one of those is pointless and sad, and the other one is going to gouge you for mediocre food. This can also apply to things to do. If we recommend a restaurant, we probably either like that place or know our coworkers like it. If we recommend an activity, it's entirely possible we were basically bribed. I would never tell someone to go somewhere I think is awful, but if there's 7 rafting places in town of equal quality, I'm going to send you to the one that will bring me sandwiches for sending you. We take your stuff. Not immediately, but if we can't figure out who you are or the number doesn't work when we call you and you forgot your $300 watch and can't be bothered to try and find it for 3 to 4 months, that's my watch. Again though, we are very honest about lost stuff. Most places I've been have some sort of file for lost and found or at least organize it by month. If you call, we will look and do our best to find your stuff, but people lose so many things that if we kept it all, half the rooms would be full of your bras and flip-flops. It doesn't hurt to ask if there's a better rate. Depending on the property, if you're nice or in a pinch, the front desk has the power to do a lot with your rate. At one property I worked at, if we were almost full and it was past 9 p.m., I could cut $50 off the rate if I felt like it. At most though, I can only really give a 10% discount, but I can do it for almost any reason. That said, don't fight about the rate. No harm in asking, but if you push or get belligerent, I'm not doing crap for you. Also, don't argue with me about the rate being right. Yes, the tax is stupid high. Yes, we're expensive. No, I won't give you the winter rates. Yes, I'm sure that's right. The computer is smarter than both of us. If you go through the internet, Expedia, Hotels.com, and Travelocity are the same thing, and they are jerks. Yeah, you'll get a discounted rate, but the fees can sometimes end up making it more expensive. They also severely undercut a lot of hotels because they have the leverage to do so. We can't do anything to your reservation without notification for whatever online service you used. Call them. They send us a fax/email. The reservation is changed or canceled. Don't call us though. We need that fax/email before we can do anything. Sorry if that makes no sense. You decided to use the service. Worked for a while on Princess. The cruise line pays for the time that any boat is docked. Therefore, it is good for the bottom line if the ship gets out of the port as soon as possible. Ports that are closer to a big city cost more money. That's why we would sometimes dock far away from a major destination and passengers would have to take a train to the big city. The ship only makes good money while it's out at sea, so I've been on voyages that would spend the late afternoon or night at sea instead of in port, in spite of 2 destinations being 30 minutes from one another. There are situations I've seen on Atlantic crossing voyages that destination locations are listed that the ship will be visiting, but no one has had good enough weather to get into that port in years. It just makes it look like there will be a destination instead of repeated days at sea. The labor force on different cruise lines tend to be preferred by different ethnicities. There are actually 2 crew bars. One for the officers and one for the rest of the crew. Boils down to being pretty racist with one for English speakers and one for everyone else. As a non-officer, I was literally not allowed to dance with customers on the club dance floor. Drinks and cigarettes are really cheap for the crew. Patter and jokes for most shows are repeated week in, week out. On Princess, there was a 9-to-1 guy-to-girl ratio among the crew. Suffice it to say that really ugly chicks were prizes. We pray you don't finish all that banquet food so we can! Oh, and untouched food eaten out of bus tubs. That's a thing. At IHG hotels, that is, Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites, Crowne Plaza, etc., if you stay there for a funeral/death and you ask for the bereavement rate, it's close to 50% off. We also weren't allowed to mention it exists, or give the rate unless directly asked for it by a guest checking in. Something else we hid from guests: generally when a guest booked a room from a third-party company, Orbitz, Booking, Expedia, they typically paid more. Our managers had us go out of our way to hide that from guests. Lastly, if a guest came into the hotel that didn't fit their ideal guest, that is, tattoos, tattered clothes, etc., we were instructed to quote them a much higher room price, and if they decided to stay, to actually charge them this inflated price. I work as a longshoreman at a cruise ship terminal. More people die on cruises than you realize, mostly old people. Norovirus is very common, but more so during flu season. Crew members will go missing, often hitching a free ride to New York City. Rare occasion, your luggage will fall in the water being loaded onto the ship. The ship will give you a very crappy refund for your loss of luggage. And if you're going to a berth with more than one ship docked, make sure you know what ship you're going on. Idiots tend to let their luggage get on the wrong ship and have a lovely week without it. Word of advice, if you're getting on a cruise ship in New York City, if your ship leaves at 4 o'clock, get there at 1:30 or 2. You will avoid the crowds and the check-in lines, and your luggage will be attended to right away. I worked at Holiday Inn Express for a little bit. Spread a towel out on the counter before putting your stuff on it, because I know some of my coworkers would go from floor to shower to toilet to sink with the same rag. We typically get 10 rags a day to clean. They are color-coded to match the cleaner they're used with, i.e., bathroom is pink, window/glass is blue, dusting solution is yellow, and we use 2 or 3 per room. If you have 15 rooms, that means you use the same cleaning rag for 3 bathrooms. And for the guest, that's the best case scenario. I know girls who would do 12 rooms or more with 2 rags. Bathroom and not bathroom. Nobody gave a crap. The goal was to remove all traces of the last guest and make it smell nice. It was the most disgusting and demeaning job I've ever had. My friend worked on Royal Caribbean on the, if I recall correctly, Explorer of the Seas back in 2006. Said I could book a cruise through him for $15 a night, employee discount. I might have to stay in his cabin with him, but he would see what he could do about getting an unused room for me. Since he departed from Bayonne, New Jersey, and I lived close, I decided to take him up on the offer and do a 4-night trip to Bermuda. The regular room, an interior cabin, panned out so I had my own room to myself, and I got a pass that allowed me access to employee-only areas. I don't know if I was supposed to be escorted with my friend in all of the non-guest areas, but no one said anything to me when I walked around the ship as long as I had my employee guest badge with access to all the employees-only doors that my badge allowed. I certainly gave no reason for anyone to be suspicious, so that probably helped. Lots of fun to just go exploring a little bit. The crew areas were relatively clean, reminded me of hospital hallways. I saw 2 crew bars. There was one that was sort of outside, I think on the rear of the ship, and one upstairs with wood paneling. Nothing to be excited about, but was fun to see them nonetheless. That's where I did my cheap drinking. Never saw the jail, but did see the medical office. They had lots of Dramamine on the wall. Help yourself, which I did. The first night I was on the ship was rough. The crew was a blast to hang out with. Lots of really fun people. My friend gave me the lowdown of everyone on the ship one night, who had hooked up with who. As incestuous as it was, everyone seemed pretty cool and willing to keep swapping the bodily fluids. No room for jealousy when you only have so many people to bang. I hated reading that. There were definitely cliques. The entertainers hung out with the entertainers, the waiters and waitresses, and hung out with themselves. My friend worked in an area where he got to know everyone, luckily. None of the busboys were likely to bang a sexy stage show dancer, is what I picked up from the interactions. Since I was not an employee, but not exactly a guest, I was in a gray area and was unusually entertaining to the women I met. Intimacy would have been like fishing in a barrel. I'm not bragging or anything. Truth is, I really wanted to hang with my friend for the limited time that he was not on duty, not spend time with random women that I won't see again. I don't regret that. Okay, maybe a little bit. One thing I took away was just how absolutely professional the crew at Royal Caribbean were. They loved their jobs, loved making the experience positive for the guests, and took that overall experience very personally. Whatever issues I saw stemmed from humans just being human. Nothing that would turn me away from traveling Royal Caribbean, quite the contrary. If working on a cruise is something that you are mulling, I'd recommend it based on what I saw, at least on Royal Caribbean. It is a truly unique experience that I don't think enough people consider at a time in their lives when they are looking for a rewarding challenge. TLDR, Friend worked for Royal Caribbean. I traveled with him at employee cost, got access to employee areas, saw stuff, got a great impression of Royal Caribbean employees, and a positive experience overall. Could have had a lot of intimacy though. Serious. What happened in your this is not a drill moment during work, school, etc.? I live in a small condo complex that backs up against a major highway separated by a tall barrier that's part concrete, part decorative wood. So it's like 5 a.m. and I'm dead asleep and the house shakes. I roll over thinking, man, someone set off fireworks way too late in the night. I'm barely asleep again and it shakes. This time I hear the boom and I'm like, screw those firework-loving kids. Well, I'm awake. Might as well use the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom and the house shakes again. Boom. Huh. So I look out the back window and there's an inferno just past the backyard, right where the lawn meets the barrier. Oh, and this is right after all those people burned to death in their houses in California. Nope. Wake up the husband, shove the cat in the carrier, grab your wallet, get in the car, and leave. The only exit from the complex is right past the inferno, but we make it okay. The cat's furious. The husband doesn't see what the big deal is. He's still mostly asleep. And I'm like, where can we go to watch the news in our pajamas? So at the neighborhood Starbucks, we're watching on our phones. The local fire department hosing down our condos with fireproof foam. A gas tanker caught fire and pulled over. Then the 3 compartments caught fire individually. The driver made it out. Our place was fine. And now I have a go bag, just in case. I was at a movie theater, one of the big ones with 12 screens. Halfway through the movie, an alarm goes off and no one really reacts. And then a recorded voice advising that an emergency situation has arisen and we are to vacate the area immediately. 12 screens emptying simultaneously into the foyer created havoc. Some minor crush injuries, people falling and tripping others. It was chaos. Kids screaming, parents trying to get in to find their kids. 5 minutes later and we are still inching towards the doors, and a real voice comes on and advises it was a false alarm and to go back and they will restart the movies. Important lesson from this for everyone. If you need to evacuate from a movie theater, take the exit near the screen that goes straight out of the building and not the one that goes back into the foyer. I was in the high school gym donating blood when the alarm for an active shooter lockdown went off. The doors were very quickly locked and people were told to remain calm and duck under tables, but those of us giving blood and hooked up to the machines had to stay in place. It turned out to be that a few young men had stolen a car and had driven it recklessly onto school property. A police helicopter had somehow gotten involved, which sparked the panic. There were no guns involved, thank goodness, but it definitely was not a good first-time donating blood experience. We were all in psychophysiopatho class when the alarm bell rang. It's a class where the whole lot of us are divided in random 25 people group of students. I didn't know any of the people in this group very well, but we were polite to each other. The teacher said no drill was supposed to take place, so we all raced the best we could outside. Except I was in crutches at the time, and the building we were in was old and had a lot of stairs. I was lagging behind, getting more and more scared that I would be left alone. Our teacher was already out, and the bulk of the group was far ahead, and I had no friends in here to make sure I was safe. Before my classmates, all girls, noticed I was struggling and doubled back to help me. It could have been any kind of danger, a fire, some idiot with a weapon, but they didn't hesitate 1 second once they saw me. One of them took my bed bag, another took my crutches, the other 2 put my arms around their shoulders and half pushed me out, half carried me out. I was viewing a traveling exhibit about the Titanic. When you entered the exhibit, you were given a ticket which had the name of an actual person aboard the Titanic. At the end, you would get to see if they survived or not. Right as we finished seeing if our person lived or died, the fire alarm went off in the museum. The exhibit staff ushered everyone into the staff area behind the exhibit and down the emergency stairs. Everything was lit with emergency lighting only and really cramped, and after having just been in the exhibit, you really felt like you were escaping a sinking ship. Probably the most surreal emergency I've ever experienced. For those asking, yes, my person did survive. They tried to match your person as close to you as possible. I was a kid at the time, so my person was a child. Much higher chance of surviving if you were a kid or a woman. One day at work, there was a huge bang, not what you want to hear at a refinery. Site goes into evacuation, managers running around trying to figure out what's happened. Turns out an asphalt truck had exploded next door, rocking our site. Many undies were soiled that day. Update for those asking. The truck has a gas heater inside it to keep the asphalt warm, road tar, and after he finished his job, he left the burner going. Gets back to depot and fills truck with kerosene to wash out. Hot tank plus flammable liquid? Yeah, soiled undies. I was taking the SAT. We were maybe 30 minutes into the writing section when the fire alarm goes off. Some guy started a fire in the computer lab of the building because he didn't bring a proper ID and they wouldn't let him take his test. We had to sit outside for 3 hours in silence before they decided, never mind, you guys have to retake this in a month. Kid brought a gun to school. He wanted to show it off and pulled it out at lunch. Yeah, you're not supposed to freaking do that. He got expelled, was relieved of any actual criminal charges on account of no bullets were brought, and he was so young. But everyone dipped from the lunchroom and all the other classes got locked down. I remember being in class when it happened, and not one of us thought it was real because our school did a drill every quarter for that crap, and it was like midway through one of them. This was 8th grade. When I was in school, about 20 years ago I think, we had a bomb threat. They evacuated the entire school out to the baseball fields for hours before they let us go home early. The very next day, we went back to school and they kept us locked in our classrooms for hours while the bomb squad removed bomb material, from what I was told, from the very baseball fields that they had made us wait on the day before. Reminds me of the school I went to where the response to a bomb threat was first to gather everyone in the buses in the front parking lot and then drove us over to one of the 2 other schools in the town. Same school district. We were in high school. There was also an elementary school and middle school. And put everyone in one of 2 gyms there, a much smaller area compared to the alternatives. I eventually stopped worrying by the logic that if there were actually bombs, then whoever set them off would have had several opportunities to kill most of us if they were smart about it, since if they knew the response was to move people to another building, then they could have just rigged one of the other schools to blow and had a 50-50 chance of getting the entire population of 2 schools. Or if they didn't know that, then they still had an excellent opportunity to kill us when everyone was gathered together in the one parking lot rather than spread out over an entire building. That school had a lot of emergency response policies that seemed really stupid, and in later years they overhauled a lot of them. But I feel the response to bomb threats of gathering everyone in 1 or 2 places takes the cake, and I hadn't heard of them fixing that while I was still attending. Honestly, not sure which policy was worse though. Your school's approach of gathering everyone in the fields was also pretty bad, even if it was at least a bit more spread out. It was just at home, but I think it was May 2019. We're about to leave for a funeral and there was a sudden earthquake. I think it was a 6, and it was surreal as it was the strongest earthquake I felt. We took shelter under door frames, and nobody was hurt, gladly. I live in a town right on the Pacific coast in Northern California. We have a tsunami warning siren, and every Sunday at noon, they test it by winding up the horn to full volume for a few seconds. When the big earthquake happened in Japan in 2011, I was literally living below sea level less than a quarter mile from the coast. A tsunami was heading for the west coast of the US, a mini version of the devastating one that hit Japan. There were warnings over TV and radio, but we didn't get them because the utility company preemptively cut power to our neighborhood to reduce damage. So the first I knew anything was up was when my roommate woke me up screaming, "There's a tsunami. We have to go now." We booked it up the hill out of the danger zone, but it didn't quite feel real until I realized the tsunami warning siren was going, and not stopping. And it wasn't Sunday. To this day, that is the eeriest sound I've ever heard. I was in 10th grade, age 15 for non-Americans, when 9/11 happened. It's hard to explain to those who didn't live through it how much the world changed literally in a day, and how while there was internet, there weren't smartphones or social media, so news traveled less instantaneously. For us, we were called out of class to go to an assembly, and we were all joking around because our school had a way of over-dramatizing random admin things that didn't really matter, of the "we are searching for a new vice principal" variety. I probably still had a wisecrack grin on my face as the head of school said they all wanted us to be together to hear this news. Then she said, "The World Trade Center has been attacked," which was where my cousin worked, and I remember the room literally looked different. We were all watching TV screens less than an hour later after the second tower fell, and we got a local breaking news about a plane crash outside Pittsburgh, which is quite the thing when your school is in Pittsburgh and you think it was heading for us, because no one knew until many days later where the 4th plane was heading. Heck, we didn't even know there were only 4. So yeah, that moment with "the World Trade Center has been attacked" and how the room looked different, literally and figuratively, I will never forget that. Was showing a documentary to my class about the second week of the semester when the president of the college came on the loudspeaker to tell us to shelter in place. Somebody had tweeted pictures of his gun saying he wanted to, quote, "light up the library," and when the FBI pinged his phone, he was on my campus. My classroom was directly above the library. We all knew this because of our smartphones. This was right before lunch. I was escorted out of the building around dinner time. Turned out, the student was bluffing. He was visiting our campus that day with his high school. Screw him. My college dorm had to evacuate because of fire. Some girl was making toast at 4 a.m. and the toaster caught fire. No serious damage was caused and firemen came pretty quickly, but being woken up by fire alarms, seeing everybody panicking, and then having to wait outside for like 2 hours in December was not fun. There was a shelter-in-place tornado warning. It was on that day that we learned our school had a bomb shelter below the pool locker rooms, and it was some Cold War crap. Damp concrete walls, doors with small round windows, and the lights were those old oval shaped with a metal cage like what you'd see on a submarine. Even had safety posters circa 1960 to 1970s. I was teaching at a high school a couple years back when my co-teacher came over from the next room and quietly asked if I had checked my email recently. I had not. When I looked, there was an urgent message from admin telling us that we were currently under a stay-in-place lockdown. Apparently some guy had gotten into a shootout with local PD earlier, ran, and was currently somewhere just off campus, still armed and dangerous. But since he wasn't an immediate threat, we were not to tell the students and continue class as normal. If the lockdown lasted into the next period, they come up with an excuse to keep all the kids in place. The kicker for me was that one entire wall of my classroom was floor-to-ceiling windows. To make it worse, the ceiling in my room was about 20 feet. We may as well have been sitting in the field outside my room for all the security we had. I made a quick decision to shoehorn a slideshow into my lesson so I had a believable excuse to close all the blinds. Luckily, the lockdown only lasted until just before the end of the period, so nobody had to punt on an excuse for what was happening. I like to think I covered well, and that none of my students noticed that I was freaking out internally. None of them ever questioned me about it, so hopefully I did. There was an earthquake. It was not that strong, but it was still an earthquake. Everyone was treating it as a drill, which meant talking and talking and talking, until an advisor said that it was not a drill, and everyone started panicking. Good times. Last November, half my school burnt down. Everybody thought it was just another drill until we got outside and began to smell smoke. There was a mad panic as all 1,300 students were registered and registered again until we knew everyone was out. The worst part, it was started by 2 first-year students. This is going to be long, just so you know. On a 225-foot buoy tender in the middle of the Pacific, halfway between Hawaii and Mexico. When you're on a ship at sea, if there's a fire, there's no 911, so you practice all the time for stuff like fire, flooding, collision, etc. But those drills occur during the day when most of the crew is awake. You're alert, the sun is out, and sea conditions are normally good, for safety reasons. But emergencies almost never happen during the day or when the sea state is calm. It was 4 a.m. I was in my rack asleep after getting off watch, so I had only been asleep for 4 hours when the general emergency alarm went off. That's the alarm that sounds for any emergency outside from collision and chemical. So I bolt upright with the what? Thinking someone accidentally hit the alarm up on the bridge. But when the watch officer comes over the ship's announcement system saying to set the main space fire doctrine for a fuel oil leak in the engine room, my stomach drops. I'm out of my rack, into my coveralls and boots, and out to the repair locker faster than he can finish the announcement. Most of the crew is already at the locker. The attack team is getting their firefighting gear on, and the engineering officer is trying to get information from the engineering watchstander. The investigators were already gone to investigate the scene. We all get our protective gear on, and I gather my team. I'm in charge of the pump team, and our job is to set up the portable fire pumps to supplement the installed ones in case the water pressure drops. But the pumps are located outside the skin of the ship on the buoy deck, and it's 4 a.m. in the middle of the ocean. Most people forget just how dark the night is. With artificial lights, we have essentially conquered night and claimed it for ourselves, despite our relatively poor night vision in comparison to other species. But when you are days away from any land, and the lookouts need their night vision preserved for their watch, that means it is awfully dark once the sun goes down. Makes for great stargazing, though. Anyways, I get permission to start setting up, so my team and I all grab flashlights and head out. It's dark as crap, and the pumps are heavy, and all in all, it sucked. It sucks during drills, and it doubly sucks in the middle of the night. We get the first pump set up and are about to start the second when we get told to wait. I certainly didn't complain. I absolutely hate those pumps. We go back into the repair locker to wait. Apparently the leak wasn't that bad and was able to be secured by the investigators. The cleanup crew heads down to clean up so the fuel doesn't create a toxic gas environment, and we go to pack the pump back up. There was a general feeling of amusement at the situation, to be honest. Also, a lot of pride in our response. We hit all the time requirements, setting up boundaries and such, and as a crew, we felt like we did good. The command felt the same way too, because the workday was suspended. We only had to go to our watches. The rest of the day could be spent however we wanted. There was a movie being played in the cruise lounge, and some of the guys set up an inflatable pool on the buoy deck to chill in. Me, I went back to sleep. This one's an even longer story. My dad is second engineer on gas tankers. A few years ago, they had a fire in the middle of the freaking Atlantic. Ship chock full of flammable, toxic, cooled down to liquid gas. I can't remember what it was, but they got it to negative 150 degrees Celsius or lower. Maybe ethylene? Skeleton crew, as crew management company was full of money-grabbing jerks, and every single thing that wasn't officially needed was underfunded and limited. I.e., ship had 3 power generators, but ship management allowed them to buy only so many parts. They had to cannibalize the third to get other 2 required by law to run, and everyone was overworked. Middle of the night, a fan sucking out exhaust from the trash burner failed, and temperature started to rise. Sensor failed first, so there was no alarm. At dog hour, metal chamber the burner was in literally melted. Metal started to burn, and first alarms blared. My dad, off duty then, informed Bridge by intercom, told them to organize action, and went down to get people out and start action. He broke procedure by that because he was supposed to wait for Bridge order to even begin any action. That includes inspection on fire size. He got in serious trouble in that later, but I'll go back to that. So he gets into gear as fast as he can, bursts down and in, drags 2 unconscious guys out of control room, starts emergency water pumps, empties both FEs that were there in vicinity on burner chamber door, glowing now, to cool it down a bit, and runs up to get proper equipment and join team. They start firefighting and soon discover almost everything there was on fire, melting and burning down. They used every single FE on board, all fire retardant they have, and gas tankers carry a crap ton of it, and by next day evening they managed to put it completely down. They lost chimney, all of it. It fell down inside, almost killing crew members. Most of main engine turbos and exhaust management, good part of electrical wiring, including electrical power control, so no load regulation on generators. Most of the bridge equipment was out, oil coolers and general crew area AC. They were also down to 1 power generator. On top of that, entire ship was considerably heated up, which meant lots of stress in the hull and gas tanks. They were venting gas as cooling equipment was overloading the power generator. Radar, satellite, high power radio, all off. They slowly creeped to US and got to Houston with Coast Guard and firefighting barge assist. Now, the true storm starts. First, they got an inspection, which revealed they didn't have enough firefighting equipment on board. Inspectors were deaf to the argument that it has all been used. Fine number 1. Second, after unloading the gas, they got a hefty fine for the gas being too hot. No duh. Also, another fine for vented gas, because cargo manifest didn't match with ship's content. Third, another fine for environmental damage, as main engine exhaust was not cooled and filtered. Lack of chimney and fire marks were of no consequence to port authorities. Next, my dad got into trouble. Ship management decided he was to pay the fine of $100,000 for not waiting on Bridge's orders. Later withdrawn, as inspection shown if he hadn't cooled down the door, no one would ever got in and 2 people would die. Also, seawater pumps couldn't be started in any other way. They still threatened him in every possible way and tried very hard to make him assign responsibility for whole fire and damages. Sadly, he was very, very close to doing it before I forced him to be with my friend, a lawyer. And the last, most infuriating part, ship management refused to pay for firefighting equipment replacements as, quote, it was crew that used them, without permission from central office. After that, they did 1 more cargo run around Mexico's ports before ship was forwarded to a shipyard for repairs. Most of the crew changed company afterwards. Yeah, cost-cutting in the most obnoxious way, haranguing on every single regulation, as long as there is even a slight chance it will slide under the radar, and complete disregard for the fact that crew is human, not a bunch of robots. My dad was a firefighter. He was casually watching Titanic at the theater. You know when this happened then. Out of nowhere during the movie, projectors stopped, all lights shut down, and some guy opens the door of the theater and told everyone to get out that there was a fire. As my dad walked out, his firefighter senses were triggered. He felt the draft of air being sucked out of the theater room going into the main hall. Fire alarm couldn't be heard from inside because the volume of the movie was so loud. Everyone got out. It was a big complex with restaurants and bars next to the cinema. Everything burnt down, millions of dollars of damages. It was a teenager playing with matches while smoking behind dumpsters. My dad had to wait for the double VHS to be released to know how Titanic ended. That's the best part of the story happening in the 20th century. For the record, it was in 1998. We had someone fall off a boat down at the boat launch when I worked at a campground. She hit her head on the dock and started sinking while unconscious. Luckily, her BF dove in and grabbed her before she drowned. However, she was incoherent, so we had to immobilize/warm her up in a truck and then call in a heli to take her to the nearest hospital. It was crazy. We had to mark a landing zone and lay down some flares and everything. School had a lockdown. Was coming back from lunch and saw a bunch of cops. Asked one what's up and was told someone had reported a gun in the building and it's on lockdown. I went home. Found out the next day, kid had a BB gun in his backpack, and I guess ticked off a friend, who then told the office what he had. Side note, the group that kid would run with was known for starting fights with people over nothing, so I guess karma is a jerk. It was woodwork, and in my classes, we have a dust collector connected to an automatic sander, and a nail happened to get sanded and made sparks to fine wood chips, so it exploded in fire in a woodwork building. I was still working as a hostess, and we had just opened up. In the morning, we usually only have 3 servers on the floor for the first 30 or so minutes. 5 to 6 families immediately walk in, which is good for the openers. Everybody gets 2 tables to start. I was seating the last of the families when I heard a horrible wail from the back. I honestly didn't think anything of it at first, until I realized 2 of the 3 servers hadn't come out front to greet their tables. One of the servers, while switching out the tea bags, scalded herself across the face with boiling water. The second server was already calling paramedics and trying to keep her calm while she went into shock. So now I had one server for 6 tables. About half of them were intensely understanding, but one family was giving me max attitude. I finally snapped at the wife and said, "Ma'am, the server in charge of your section just suffered 3rd-degree burns across her face. If you're in such a rush that you cannot wait for emergency crews to get here, I would be more than happy to suggest other establishments that can accommodate you." Right at that moment, the EMTs arrived. 6 huge Captain America stunt doubles finagling the gurney through the restaurant. She shut right up. The server ended up being okay and didn't have any permanent scars, but for the rest of the day I was jittery from the adrenaline rush. Parents of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to collect your child? I was called to collect my son when he was in 1st grade because, quote, he was being disrespectful to his classmates. They wouldn't explain. My son told me that Jeffrey pantsed him, and that makes no sense. About an hour later, the light bulb went on. "You didn't wear underwear today, did you?" "Nope." When I was in middle school, some poor guy got pantsed right in front of me. A girl who shared many of his classes. Normally, it'd be no big deal. Someone got pantsed in my school on at least a weekly basis. No, the really awkward part was I was kind of crouched down because I had a bottom locker and he was standing up with the top locker next to mine. Not above, but I guess on a diagonal. His pantser shouted right as he pulled, so of course I looked up at the shout because it startled me. And well, the pantsed individual's boxers had been pulled down along with his pants, so right in front of my eyes was a dingaling. It was the first dingaling I'd ever seen in person, well outside of seeing like baby cousins get changed and stuff, and considering we were 11, I was presumably the first girl, outside of his close family when he was little, to see his dingaling. It was just for a split second because obviously the guy pulled his pants back up with lightning reflexes. I've never seen someone go so red in the face. We both stood there in shock for a couple of seconds as the hallway cleared and began walking in class. We shared the next class. Oh no, that's even more awkward. The whole time he was stammering out apologies and I kept telling him it wasn't his fault. It's not like he'd pulled his own pants down. After class, other students asked me if I'd seen it, and I lied profusely. What are you talking about? He was wearing underwear. How would I see anything? Oh, well, in the back they came down. The whole hallway could see his butt. Oh my god, well, they didn't come down in the front. The rest of the year, this guy who was a practical stranger was pretty nice to me. Not like flirty nice, but I think he figured out that I lied, so I felt he owed me one. I was called in because the elementary school was going on a field trip that my son forgot to give me the permission slip for. He decided to give forgery a whirl. This was in 1st grade, so the handwriting was awful. He also signed my name, Mom. I got a phone call earlier this year from the school nurse, saying she was concerned because my son had passed out while on the lunch line. I went to pick him up and he seemed a little dazed, but okay. My kid couldn't remember anything about what happened beforehand, so I made an appointment with his pediatrician for an hour later. Right as we're getting to leave, he sheepishly said, "Mom, I just remembered that right before I passed out, we were playing a game to see who could turn their face the reddest." So, my kid had me thinking he had a brain tumor, but no, he just held his breath until he passed out, and not a single other kid thought they should mention that to the teacher. Embarrassed to admit, but I've done this before. I was getting ready for school in the morning and decided out of the blue to do this. Promptly passed out and cracked my head on the dresser on the way down. I come to almost immediately and just sat there on the floor confused as to what happened. I already had this huge lump forming on my head and a killer headache, but I didn't want to tell my dad because I didn't want him to be mad. So I went to school and was miserable all day. When I got home, I finally told my sister. She took one look and ran to tell Mom. I had a goose egg-sized lump on my head. All said and done, I had 2 MRIs and a sleep test. Don't know the proper name. Everything turned out fine in the end. I never admitted I'd passed out because I held my breath too long. In my senior year of high school, I was nearly not allowed to graduate, and my family was called because I forged my own name by writing in the Guardian section of a permission slip. I was 18. My kid got in huge trouble in kindergarten. A girl told the teacher he said the S word. He lost recess, they called me, it was a big deal. I went to pick him up and said, "So what's the S word?" And he stared at his shoes and whispered, "Sexy." Yeah, confirmed by the little tattletale. All of this was caused by sexy. Funniest one I've ever heard. My kid surprisingly well behaved at school. Was a parent having to come get their kid after they were caught selling imaginary friends to the younger students for $1 apiece. I made the mistake of telling my stepdaughter about the professor I had in college that we never knew read our papers, so it turned into a class game to fit ridiculous sentences and bad jokes into the middle of them to see if we'd ever get caught. She apparently decided that was an amazing thing to do, and I got called for a phone conference because she turned in a history paper that was chock full of awful puns that were not appreciated. My mother was called to pick me and my twin sister up because we were turning blue. I think it was in 4th grade. We felt fine though. It was only after she arrived that we all remembered she had put brand new blue flannel sheets on our bed the night before. Apparently, she hadn't washed them first. My little brother liked cheese and mustard sandwiches, so my mom made him cheese and mustard sandwiches for lunch. When the teacher asked why he didn't have any meat on his sandwich, he said either "we can't afford meat" or "my mom doesn't let me," or something like that. Whatever he said was enough to send CPS over to the house. Another time, he came to school saying that his mom loved Coke, that his mom said she's addicted to Coke. CPS was called again. They lived in a different area this time. Coca-Cola. My mom couldn't go a day without a Coke, so she joked that she was addicted to Coke. I do see the irony that she was actually addicted to a drug, just not the one CPS was worried about. I got a call that my son was sick and that I had to come pick him up. He was completely fine that morning. I asked the nurse, "He really can't go back to class?" And she said, "He says he's really sick." Fine. I picked him up and on the walk home I asked what was up. He said he had to fart really badly and didn't want to do it in class. I laughed and said okay. 2 days later, I get another call to pick him up. So I got him and it was for the same reason. I told him that it was funny once, but that from now on, if he needed to fart in class, he should go to the bathroom. Daycare. Had to talk to the director because my son, 3 or 4, told another kid, "I'm gonna F you up." Turns out, he was singing Bruno Mars' Uptown Funk You Up. My child's 1st grade teacher was upset that he had accidentally smooshed a butterfly on the playground at recess. When I got there, my child was also missing his glasses. She hadn't noticed this. My youngest had a slight speech impediment when he was at nursery. He would replace his S's with F's to approximate the sound. I had to have a chat with the head at pickup time because I'd unthinkingly used the phrase "so long, suckers" when pulling away from some traffic lights the day before, and he liked the sound of it so much he used it himself. My professor cited my mom because she said I was writing too slow and turned my test in right as the bell rang. My mom had to leave work early to hear about her child writing slow. The reason I was writing slow was because on my last test, I was docked points for handwriting. So this time, I made sure I had the purtiest, most fanciest handwriting that teacher had ever seen. After that, the teacher stopped docking me points due to handwriting. As somebody with notoriously crappy handwriting, I felt this post. That was in elementary school, early years. The principal called us and looked at us with a stern look of disapproval while telling us our son was using bad language. I then proceeded to explain to her that my wife and I only spoke French at home and we did not have television. The only English our son had ever heard was at school, so I asked her what she was going to do about it. It was one of the shortest conversations I ever had with that principal. About the principal, as I recall, she suddenly remembered she had to do something urgently and the meeting was over before I could say anything else. Literally, pardon my French. I was the kid and I was in 3rd grade. I climbed on a tree, not even that high, and then I wanted to climb down. A teacher who hated me saw me and told me to stay there and not to move. I told her it's no problem for me to come down. She insisted I stayed there and turned around to call the fire brigade to get me down. I had enough and climbed down anyway, and then she called my mom because it was my fault the fire brigade was called for no reason. I was in an early morning college class, and when I got out, I realized I had missed calls, texts, and emails from my daughter's preschool. A voicemail said she had been throwing up and to please hurry and come get her. When I got to the school, the receptionist showed me to a room where my daughter was sat with the trash can on her lap. She told me my daughter kept announcing she was throwing up and then would cough into the trash can. She had no fever and was otherwise cheerful and talkative. I signed her out, got her outside, and into my car where she jumped forward and kissed my cheek and told me she missed me and where would I like to go for lunch. That kid busted herself out of preschool to finagle a lunch date with me. It worked. Aww. I was the child in 6th grade. I was 12. I was in my emo phase and was wearing a lot of black eyeshadow from Claire's. I guess I wasn't so good at my makeup yet because they called my mom into the office to discuss my injuries and who was, in quotes, hurting me. I had super bad allergies as a child to the point where I had awful dark circles under my eyes that legitimately looked like bruises. I had the principal and my teacher asking if everything was okay at home and pointed to my eyes. I let them know about my allergies and they skeptically accepted the answer. 2 weeks later, I stepped in a large hole in the ground by accident and fell flat on my face, giving me an actual black eye. Trying to explain to the principal, my teacher, and the school counselor that I actually fell was no easy task. My son went to a private Catholic school from 1st grade through 8th grade. I had a nun call me one day because my son and a friend were having a peeing for distance contest in the bathroom. And then another day I was called because my son was looking to see if the dictionary had the word dingaling in it. Both incidents were in the 3rd grade. When I was in 7th grade, I was an office runner. Basically, if your reading and writing skills were above a certain level, they let you skip reading class and just work in the office, getting kids whose parents had come for them, delivering messages, that sort of thing. Anyway, the kid next to me just wouldn't shut the heck up. He kept rattling on and on and on, and I had enough of it. I had a monster fart brewing, so I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and farted on him. Or, at least, that was the plan. Instead, I cocked my leg, locked eyes with him, told him to shut his mouth, and completely crapped my pants in the most glorious fashion. This wasn't a little nugget. This was a full pants load of chocolate pudding that ran down my leg and made a little puddle on the floor. Everything in the office goes dead silent, and there's no mistaking what's just happened. The kid just stared at me with absolute horror in his eyes. Without looking away from him, I raised my hand and said, "Miss Office Lady's name, I don't remember. I think I need to call my mom." I went home, took a bath, threw the pants away, and came back the next day. The kid was seated on the opposite side of the room from me, and I never had a problem with him again. He feared and respected me from then on. Anybody want dessert? My dad got sent to the principal's office for telling his 6th grade teacher she was pronouncing the state capital of South Dakota, Pierre, wrong. She kept saying Pierre, 2 syllables like the French name, and he said it was Pierre, 1 syllable, like what you fish off of. He was sent off for not respecting a teacher's authority. My grandma had to drive to school to talk to the teacher and principal and says, "Did you ask why he says it's Pierre? Because if you did, you'd find out that both his father and I are from South Dakota. He visits his grandparents and aunts and uncles in South Dakota every summer. He knows plenty of people from South Dakota who all say Pierre. Do you know anyone from South Dakota? No? Well, take it from a South Dakotan. It's Pierre. We're not fancy French people, and stop wasting my time." Okay, but to be honest, I didn't know it was Pierre either. I kept saying Pierre all my life, so I'm sorry if there's anybody out there who was offended by my ignorance as a young child. So yeah, let's just keep going. We don't have to talk about it. My son, 14, 8th grade, during class change walked into the boys' bathroom, put his hands over his head, and while thrusting his hips in a humping motion, told all the other boys in the room to "Protect your buttholes, gentlemen, here I come." The funniest part about it all, that exact same description was jotted down on the write-up slip. Even the principal couldn't stop laughing. My daughter hid inside of a toy box for hours in preschool, and the teachers couldn't find her. She's gonna be my wild child. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a shirt that we got as a hand-down from a friend of my mom's with Braille on the front. Apparently, no one ever took the time to figure out what it said, but there was a translator/key on the sleeve, so I sat down and translated the word on the front, 1 letter at a time while in class. F-U-C-K-O-F-F. "Oh my," I said. I knew this was a bad word, so I told my teacher and apologized. I wasn't in trouble, but my parents were called and asked to come bring in a new shirt while I waited in the office. My principal thought it was hilarious, apparently. We had a classmate who was partially blind. I'm unsure if she had vision enough to see my shirt, but she did know Braille. I believe that is one of the reasons I had to wait in the office, though. Not a parent, but as a kid, when I got Pokemon Yellow, I was so gosh darn into it that when we went out for lunch one day at school, I got inside this huge bush that was practically hollow inside. It was among a load of other large bushes and trees at the side of the school field, and rarely ever was entered by students because we weren't really allowed. So I sat there for hours playing Pokemon, and when I came out it was 3 p.m. School closed at 3:30. I had been in there since 12:30, and my mother was at the school and was freaking out because she thought they let me leave the school alone. I got called on my work cell several times right out of college to come to a local high school because my 14-year-old son was in trouble. I don't have a son, and if I had a son, it would be very impressive if he was 14 years old then because I would have had to conceive him when I was 9. I told them that. They kept calling. Finally, I showed up at the high school to prove that I, a 23-year-old white guy, was not the father of the 14-year-old Indian boy. The assistant principal was like, "Oh, right." My mom told me that when my brother was in grade school, she got the call to pick him up for a day's suspension. Turned out during lunch, he opened his lunchbox and pulled out a can of Foster's. It was empty and it was meant to be a joke, but the school didn't see it that way. He was 9 and right at the start of a decade-long mission to raise heck. I got a call to pick up my daughter in kindergarten because she had no underwear. She had them on when I put her on the bus, so I have no idea what happened. Totally embarrassing. Oh my. I have 4 kids, all adults now, who were pretty high-spirited back in the day. My oldest son, however, wins the prize from an incident in 6th grade. I got a call one afternoon that he had been sent to the principal's office. Nothing new there, and I needed to come get him at once. Uh-oh. He had mooned the 2nd graders. All of them. And their teachers. Not me, but a classmate of a coworker sent everyone home many years ago. He nicked a decent bit of elemental potassium from the chemistry lab and dropped it down the sewer access pipe outside the school. This was not good for the school's plumbing. City had to dig up the sidewalk to repair things. For those not aware, here's a quick chemistry lesson. Potassium plus water equals violent boom. Nobody should be throwing any sort of potassium or sodium down a sewer pipe because that will cause severe problems. Not me, but my sister. She got a call from her son's very Catholic school that he needed to be picked up. She gets to the school and the principal said that he had to go home for the day because he peed on the tree outside at recess. He really laid into her about how they had to bleach the tree. Seriously, they poured bleach on the tree because a little kid peed on it. And it was terrible, and how she shouldn't be teaching her son these things. My sister looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Do you really think I have the right plumbing to have taught him that? Yell at my husband when he comes in next time." Me, when I was a kid, we moved from Middle America to the West Coast. I had extra R sounds in my words. They called my mom about my speech impediment. After talking to my mom, they understood that it was not a speech impediment, but my birth sound language. It is Washington, not Washington. It's funny now, but wasn't at the time. One day, I was called to pick up my daughter from school. I asked why and was vaguely told she had been caught cheating, was being disrespectful to the teacher, and had destroyed government property. Holy crap, I thought. What had she done? My mind instantly went through scenarios in which she had cheated on a test, got caught, that my sweet little 7-year-old had cursed the teacher while throwing something out the window. I go to the school, found my scared daughter in the principal's office looking totally dejected and asked for an explanation. I discovered the cheating was that she had giggled while playing a game where someone was it, and the other half of the classroom had to guess who it was. The disrespecting teacher was from her crossing her arms when she was being told how she wrecked the game. The best was the explanation for destroying government property. During story time, she was picking at loose carpet threads. I was extremely angry with my daughter the whole drive from work, and after this load of WTF, it instantly transferred to anger with the school. You called me here because she giggled, crossed her arms, and picked at old nasty carpet? I was hot and took my daughter home, letting her know I was a bit upset with her, but let her know that there would be no more punishment. She'd been through enough. We went home and watched cartoons, and I made her favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup for lunch. I received a call from the vice president of my daughter's school one day while I was at work. I could tell the VP was holding back her laughter, but she tried to remain professional. "Hello. Your daughter acted out in class today. The children were switching from coloring to reading at the carpet. She threw her crayons down and pointedly said to the teacher, 'Are you freaking kidding me?' My knee-jerk reaction was, 'Dang it, are you freaking kidding me?' It's clear where she learned this from. My second thought was, dang, I have a kid in junior kindergarten that knows how to use that phrase in a correct form. The following year, the VP is no longer at the school. We attend similar social groups and talk often. She loves to tell me that making that phone call was one of the funniest calls she has had to make as an educator. My dad was called into the school when I was in grade 1. Apparently, I've been caught with my hand in a girl's pants and hers in mine while in class. Okay, but I feel like we're missing context here. By apparently, I can think of 2 options. 1, you were caught but didn't know that you had done anything wrong until your dad came to pick you up. Or 2, you were somehow pegged as doing something you didn't actually do, which, given most American school systems, I could easily believe. But where's the evidence, OP? Nephew was staying with me for 2 months. I showed him Dexter's Laboratory for the first time. Next day, they called me to pick him up because he would only say omelette de fromage to any interaction. I too was the child. I peed on my friend in 5th grade. Another pee one? What's going on here? We were competing in who could pee the furthest back from the urinal when a buddy of mine decided to run underneath it for laps. Hand slipped, peed down his back. Sent to the principal's. My 4-year-old's teacher told me he had repeatedly called her a butthole. She had taken something away from him and said, "That's all." Every time she came near him, he said, "That's all" to her. Knowing him, he probably used the same tone of voice she had used, and she was a nasty piece of work. In case you don't get it, say "that's all" to yourself in increasingly varying tones, and you'll see why he got in trouble. Unicorn Club. So my daughter was in 5th grade. She was proving to be pretty responsible, so she was allowed to have a cell phone, because she was home about an hour before I was on weekdays, and an Instagram account that I heavily monitored. We never had any issues, still haven't, and now she's in high school. Well, I get a call from her school's principal one day. He tells me 2 boys were fistfighting in the lunchroom. I asked what that had to do with my daughter. Well, apparently, my child had used an Instagram account to start what was essentially a cult called Unicorn Club. Unicorns were obviously the worshipped deity, with goats being the devil figure to the unicorn gods. These 2 boys got into a fistfight over whether unicorns or goats were better. I had to pick her up to prevent further disputes and disband Unicorn Club. TLDR, my 10-year-old daughter created a small cult around unicorn worship. Guys, leave a comment right now. Unicorns or goats? My child with mild tree nut allergy went to the nurse since she ate a mystery food and her throat felt weird. She has been evaluated and her allergy does not warrant an EpiPen. I rush over because she usually gets hysterical and would need Benadryl, which the school can't administer. I arrive. She's all smiles. She feels better now after some water. The mystery food? Fuego Takis. She was 6 when this happened. The one that made me laugh and shake my head was when my son was in the 2nd grade. He decided that instead of helping one of his fellow classmates with his work, that he'll just do his work for him. When I asked him why, his answer really tickled me. Mom, so our table will be the first table to get snacks. People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? My friend's dad told him about the weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, that kid decided that right after school, he'll be growing fun guy instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him. And guess what? Right now, he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. Sounds like a pretty fun guy. We had a kid that would do weird stuff in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise, he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party, he saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then, after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with 2 of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off, leaving his 2 mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was Azpect, or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke, it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying his tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free English town, and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a 2nd time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back, and now he works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX, as well as running street art classes where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. I wouldn't say I ran into him, but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life, but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school, he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground, and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out. Didn't run into him, but randomly saw a TED Talk he gave on YouTube. He's a physicist now, and has been lobbying the government to increase funding for science education in order to ensure future generations can continue the fight against climate change. He's a way better person than I became. One kid like that died in a car accident senior year. Everyone then pretended they were his best friend and that they were so sad, etc., etc., etc. These people basically tortured this kid. Their reactions were disgustingly fake. I never realized how many phony monsters I knew until that happened. Luckily, I never had to see those people again soon after. She was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc., and seemed like she was happy. Sadly, she died in a car accident a year or so later. Girl in high school used to be really to herself. Super into anime, just assumed she was shy, so I'd make a point to have small chats with her every day. Until one day she said her pillow wasn't screwing her right. Apparently her pillow had conscience and she used it to pleasure herself. Graduated a few months later. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. I'm making coffee at a cafe when said girl walks up to me. She's super polite and bubbly, but as I ask how her day is going, she tells me that the demon that forced himself upon her was actually her guardian angel and she needed him around or something. Haven't seen her since. In case somebody needed to be told today, don't stick it in crazy. Ran into the kid who was effectively the school bully at the bank one day. He wasn't a physical bully, but made fun of everyone and was just mean in general. He walks up to me holding his daughter and gave me a classic white guy, well gosh darn it, how the heck are ya? And this is gonna sound crazy, but he legit became the nicest guy in the world. Extremely well adjusted, great family, great career. He invited me to go out to the driving range the following Sunday, and for whatever reason, I was inclined to go. Wound up hitting golf balls and smoking J's with him for most of the day and had a heart-to-heart. Turns out, he was terribly abused his entire life, and his father punished him by forcing him to stay awake all night. He was petrified to go home, so he did whatever he could to get detention. Explains a lot. Never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers, and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me and asked me to the 8th grade prom, but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school. I received a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me and that he would off himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later, we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook, I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly, I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in high school. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day, I received a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all of the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that. Now, by the looks of his Facebook, he's a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. Calmed down significantly and is happily married now. He acted out in school because he was being abused by his foster parents at home. Nobody knew at the time. I don't know, he just keeps making crappy edits of Drew Pickles from the Rugrats, going places around town and talking in a text-to-speech voice. That's hyper-specific. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day, my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did, and we became friends. We went to different high schools, so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and then. He found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. He renamed himself Green Dragon of the West. He's a network engineer, so okay, I guess. Voice actors note, a lot of these stories are about the weird kid committing heinous crimes that I cannot talk about on YouTube, so apologies if some of these stories turn up a little short. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing, but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So, still making up things to try and make herself look better. I'm doing fine and have not murdered anyone. I was the weird kid. Mom was never really around, no father figure. We lived in a half-renovated house with animal feces through it because my mom kept her dogs indoors 24/7. We were also extremely broke. Like, Mom would go hungry to feed my sister and I. My mother, on reflection, was mentally unwell due to the depression of losing her mom 2 years prior. She still hasn't recovered to this day. I realized years later my clothes probably smell like animal feces all the time. I had very few friends in high school. I ended up getting into drugs at 13 to escape from my crappy life, plus I had no boundaries or restrictions from my parental figures. I also lived on my PlayStation and Game Boy due to not having any friends to actually spend time with, making me socially inept. Both my sister and I were eventually uplifted by welfare services, and I ended up in a boys' home for 3 years, where I finally got the boundaries and basic care I needed. I had a great social worker who worked hard to set me up with a positive future despite my circumstances. I slowly gained social skills and realized I could have a normal life. After leaving school, I realized I had a strong work ethic that led me to work up to holding management positions in basically every business I've worked in since my early 20s. It also got me through university doing a Bachelor of Social Work. Now, I'm a social worker, supporting young adults to change the direction of their lives and to have a life they could be proud of. I've just been promoted to manage the service I work for and to grow the service so it could be extended to other districts. I guess I've done all right for myself when I look at where I've come from. I'm also happily married with 3 amazing kids, whom I make my life mission to have a better upbringing than the one I experienced. For those who are asking about my mom and my sister became a semi-pro athlete and also graduated uni. She's in a long-term relationship and has a job that enables her to train for her sporting discipline. Mom's doing okay. She's still not mentally there, but she is better than she was, and she does try most days. She loves the grandkids and spoils them every time she sees them. She's got a job now and has held it down for a few months. Her decision-making is still poor sometimes, but my sister and I keep an eye on her and challenge her decisions when they're not helpful to her quality of life. He's in prison for owning, my lord. Like I said before, can't mention that on YouTube. It's CP, by the way. He was still wearing the same hoodie that he had every single day in high school, 5 years after graduation. I don't know what I'd expected, but it blew my mind. She moved to New York City and was one of the stars of a Broadway musical. See? The weird kid in school can have a successful acting career. Wait a minute, I'm pretty sure I was the weird kid. But runner-up was a very nice but shy girl who immigrated from China and loved computers, but was incredibly meek. A conversation was like prying teeth, would only make strange noises in class, etc. And frankly, in hindsight, what little she said at the time makes me realize now she was in an emotionally abusive household. Example, she had some small role in a school play in middle school. I was happy for her when I saw that her mom came, as she said she doubted her mom would come. I asked afterwards, and she said her mom said she looked like a sack of dog bones on the stage during her part. I legit did not know what to say when she said stuff like that because I was a kid myself. Fortunately, I can say I know how she turned out, and it's a happy ending. We went to the same college, and she was originally signed up for pre-med because even though this gal was a computer whiz, her mom insisted she had to be a doctor. Within a year though, she rebelled against everything and became a computer science major, the horror, and became a known source of advice for other kids of Asian descent in particular, seeking to stand up to their parents' expectations. She's now a test engineer working for a household name computing company and posts pictures of international travel and various geeky hobbies. So, I guess she was great once she could find herself, and most of the weirdness was imposed upon her. People are asking how I was weird. Unfortunately, while astronomy is a cool thing to be into as an adult, it is not when you are at an all-girls high school. This was combined with how honestly I didn't know how to interact with a lot of the other kids. I wasn't shy, but had real trouble making friends. Was very ostracized in elementary school too, like kid who sat alone at lunch for years, and didn't figure it out until college. I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally, he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said, he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. Wow, my dad has a similar high school story. I promise that my recollection of this is true, but my father may have embellished some bits, though I don't see why he would. Back when my father was in high school, he had several classes with the weird kid/outcast. Always kept to himself and had trouble making friends because he wasn't engaging in conversations like most people are. Not that he wouldn't socialize, but rather, he only socialized when necessary, and to him, it was a means to an end. For context, the story was told like a decade ago. And that kid was Tom Cruise. I did verify, they indeed went to the same high school together, and were in the same year. So, take from that what you will. It's been 7 years and he still messages me on Facebook once a week. I haven't spoken to him or replied in 7 years and he sends me paragraphs of text. I see it as a dang game now. Freaking 7 years. What the heck, Mark? It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high-functioning autistic, and thus was considered very weird in high school. He's found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. He's taking classes on and off at a local university, but doesn't know what he wants to go into. He's also getting into writing fanfiction and is continuing his passion for LEGO. On a side note, his creations in LEGO are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. He discovered that he was better at interacting with computers than with people and became a software engineer. Ran into him at Costco, wrapping up a PhD at 25. Not bad at all. There was a girl at my school who I'll call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward/unaware girl I've ever met. Like, pleasuring herself at school awkward, picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how not to do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her, but needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have Facebook until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work and he asked me out at one point. He was also really, really nice, but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they're perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children, so they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think, Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy, and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're as happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. The type of weird that you wanted to have as a friend rather than not. I have a few too many stories with this kid in middle/high school. He was a kleptomaniac, had illegal, exotic, and dangerous pets, obsession with knives and weapons, had no regard for normal social standards and cues. Despite him being an innately skilled entrepreneur, he was a general menace to society. I went off to college and later learned his home was raided by ATF. His father had been manufacturing automatic weapons for the Latin kings, and they charged him on an unregistered gun and pot/shroom chocolates found in his room. Last I heard of him after he got out of prison was on a flyer for a community board advertising basic around the house labor, with his head superimposed on a cartoon Superman. I met him at a bus stop, and I only managed to say, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing nowadays?" He responded, "I'm a cat, meow, meow," and ran away across the road, where he almost got hit by a car in the process. I didn't see him come back to take a bus. I suppose he turned into a furry or something? He is so much happier than he was in high school, where people would physically assault him, harass him, and mock him. He has autism and is obsessed with Batman and sharks. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago when I was walking around my friend's college, and he was delighted to see me, and even remembered my name where we caught up. And he told me all about how he had been on vacation and got to go out on a boat and see sharks. I mean, Batman and sharks are both pretty freaking rad. Still weird. Not as weird as in high school when he invited me over to have frozen pizzas and watch Animal Planet, the original Netflix and chill. He asked every single day in science class, without fail. Then he wiped his bugs on the front of my desk. We had a kid who thought he was a ninja. He even wore the shoes with the split toes. Ended up getting busted talking 12-year-old girls online into favors at a local park. While awaiting trial, was busted by internet vigilantes posing as underage girls going after multiple faked accounts. His trial was on the news quite a bit. About 10 years later, there was an expose on conditions at a prison, and he was interviewed working out in the yard. Few years after his release, a news crew knocked on his door for one of those kitty diddlers in your neighborhood do you know where they are segments. One of the kids from back in school has a very nice compilation of all these segments. At a 10-year-old high school reunion, met up with two guys. One who was captain of the football team, always had the hot chicks, you know the type. The other who had been a painfully shy and awkward nerd that was shunned and made fun of. Overheard the conversation with the nerd, instigated it with Mr. Football, which went something like this. "Hey, what have you been doing with yourself?" Mr. Football said he was in the Navy, I forget the rank, and was a cook at the Brig, aka Navy Jail. Nerd replied, "Hey, I joined the Navy too." He went on to very humbly say he was a lieutenant commander, fighter pilot, and was working on his PhD in some sort of engineering field. He walked off. True revenge of the nerd. I thought this was going to end in one of those and everybody clapped stories, but I'm glad this was more believable. Just saw a guy who ran with the weird crowd at my school. They were the anime manga type crowd, but I always respected them for doing what they enjoyed. He approached me at the local gym. A very polite, respectful guy always, and I found out that he was working and playing in 2 bands. I'm glad he came up to me, and I'm extremely glad he's doing what he loves to do. Let people do what they do, as they'll probably let you do what you love to as well. He's still my friend, still weird, just a bit more mature. I think he'll be single forever though. He gets girls, but never long term. He's just too unique. It will have to be a very certain person. Those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I'm not sure you trust that kid at all. Weird, but always mad and very strong. My dad sent me a newspaper clipping some years ago. He was around 40 and at a country and western nightclub when 3 men in their 20s jumped him in the parking lot. He then went inside and told the bar owner that he'd been jumped in his parking lot. He then told him to call the police and to make sure an ambulance was called because they were hurt badly. "Call an ambulance, but not for me." I dated the weird kid in middle school, but he moved away and we lost contact. We reconnected when I was in college. He dropped out of high school and was kind of lost in life. He'd gotten 2 girls pregnant and was working 3 jobs to pay child support. He flirted heavily with me when we talked, and I decided it wasn't worth the baggage and politely stepped out of his life. Last I heard, he became a skinhead and joined an alt-right faction in Oklahoma. This is a certified 0 to 100 moment. I was a weird kid. The way I would put it is, if I were born 10 to 15 years later, I probably would have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was smart, emotionally precocious, but I had a lot of strange coordination and motor control issues. For me, playing looked like collecting or sorting piles of things from the backyard or lining up my toys in height order. Never had many friends, dressed like a dork, had trouble fitting in. I was awkward, teased, and bullied into late middle school. I grew out of it somehow. I don't really remember there being any process. I like to think that I grew into myself. I got good social skills. I'm relatively attractive, and people like me. Still have some weird idiosyncrasies, but I'm cool enough to own them nowadays. My childhood and adolescence still influence a lot of my fears, but overall, I'm glad to be who I am now, and growing up was important for that to happen. Let me introduce you to Josh. Josh was a strange boy in both looks and demeanor. Clearly, he was from a poor background, which stood out in school because the overall demographic of the school was middle to upper middle class. So Josh shows up on the first day, slightly grubby looking, barely able to write his own name at 11 years old and looking like he wanted to punch a wall. He quickly made a name for himself, acting up in class, being tardy, and generally being a bit of a nuisance. He'd disrupt lessons, he'd lash out at other students, and he had a clear anger problem. Josh became an easy target for bullies because he would react to their bullying, usually by throwing a chair. It's fair to say, Josh had little to no friends. We were a tutor group of about 27 to 30, depending on people coming and going. Not a particularly tight-knit, but we had bonded over a couple things. A girl who'd had a brush with death was our tutor. One of our tutors left partway through the year. By year 9, we, for the most part, began to tolerate Josh. Josh, as a result, became more trusting and calmed down. He still had a heck of a temper and he was still an easy target, but he began to try and socialize a bit more. One day, it was a rainy lunchtime, and he came and sat with a group of us, all from the same tutor group. We asked him how he was, and he disclosed to us that his mom's new boyfriend had been showing him homosexual adult images. We, of course, being 13 to 14, didn't really know what to say or how to react, but there was a resounding consensus that that was not normal. He'd hinted at a very, very unhappy home life before. In hindsight, I don't know why any of the teachers didn't pick up on it when things he had mentioned were such a safeguarding risk. The more and more Josh disclosed, more of how miserable his home life was, how abused he was, the more respect we had for him. He didn't know anything other than violence. He had never been shown love or respect. He had never been given the opportunity to better himself. Over time, we became very, very protective of Josh. The cool boys in our tutor group would step into fights to defend him. We'd all keep an eye out for him when he was walking home, etc. I saw Josh about a year ago. I caught a glimpse of him in the street and shouted his name. He came running over and gave me the biggest bear hug ever. He told me he'd been working really hard on himself and that he was hoping to get a job in the local comic book shop where he spends hours and hours reading. He seemed genuinely happy and like he'd escaped his abusive background. Honestly, I wish him the absolute best, and I hope he finds both happiness and stability. Last time I saw him, he was running across campus, although he wasn't late for class. He did this in high school all the time. I caught his attention and we walked and chatted. He was my friend in high school. He's doing great. Weird is good. Weird hugging girl. Just saw her about a month ago. She's a teacher now and living the American dream. I can tell her favorite teacher was also mine. She operates just like him. She's on a successful path. Homeboy, whose parents adopted him for the tax break, is happily married with children. He found love and despite everything going against him, is successful. High school students of Reddit, just because they're that kid does not mean they are not human. Be humble. We've all been that kid. Redditors who lost their job because of a post to a social media platform. What happened? I've recently come into contact with a few people who lost their job over a Facebook-type social media outlet post, and it got me wondering, what kind of jobs take social media posts so seriously? I worked customer support for a mobile game company. I was honest with a disheartened customer who had complained that recent changes had made the game pay to win. It had, in truth, been a glitch with an update. I told them as much, assuring them the team would be fixing it in the next update. But then the game's profits skyrocketed. The team kept the glitch and put out a statement describing the change as an intentional one designed to improve the play experience. But there was my name, plastered all over the game forums, claiming the opposite. I technically worked for a separate company that provided support for several studios, but the studio behind this game was our biggest customer. They approached my bosses, furious that I jeopardized their cash cow, and demanded I be fired. I promptly became familiar with the underside of the bus as I was gone within the week. TLDR, worked customer support for mobile games, told truth, went viral-ish, fired. Didn't lose my job, but I watched a friend lose his over a tweet. He tweeted, "So getting head while delivering pizzas is pretty sweet," one night while he was working. The next morning, he tweeted, "Yo, screw you, Papa John's. I don't need you or your stupid job anyway," or something to that effect. I've never laughed so hard in my life. I used to work for Geek Squad in college, and a coworker was fired when a famous actor came in and she posted on Facebook a lot of his private info. Like full name came into her store and bought this and has a black Amex card and stuff he had on his computer. Not once, but on 2 separate occasions. Worked at GameStop until 2010. The store was in a mall, and parents would always lead their kids in the store and go do their shopping. Sometimes the children would cry, sometimes they'd pee themselves, even had one number 2. Parents would get mad at us for not bringing them to the bathroom, what the heck? Or start screaming at their kids for not just playing games for a few hours without causing any problems. I tweeted about how the store wasn't there to babysit children and never really thought about that tweet again. Until, a few months later, same thing. Parent drops kid off in store, leaves. 20 minutes later, an older-looking guy is outside the store, on his flip phone, aiming it at the store. He's creeping me out, but I continue offering pointless warranties to customers while waiting for my next break, and then I noticed him walk near the entrance of the store and ask that kid where his parents are. This seemed really fishy, and the guy looked beyond suspicious. I was thinking he could be a kitty diddler, and I was right. He gets the kid to go with him, I call up mall security so they could check it out, and they caught him before he left the mall. He was arrested. The kid was crying, asking for his mom, who mall security could not reach because, as it turns out, she went to some stores outside of the mall area and she didn't actually come back for another 2 hours, at which point she threatened to sue me, GameStop, the mall, etc. Security guard lady told her that child services were called. They all walked away. That was the last time I saw them. Few days later, district manager, DM, shows up in store and I was fired on the spot because that lady made a complaint. DM found my Twitter and informed me that my approach to yesterday's dilemma and my tweet about how GameStop isn't a babysitting service has made them believe that I don't have the, quote, GameStop spirit. Both the manager and district manager told me I could use them as a reference on my resume though, which was great until they both lost their jobs a few weeks later. A former colleague of mine posted about how he was going to use up all his sick leave and then quit. He posted it at 9 a.m. He was told he had no more job at 11. I was working as a bartender and server for a place. The assistant manager was a petty tyrant and treated the staff like crap. I had made several complaints about him to the general manager and the owner with some of the other staff, but they refused to do anything about it. So I was done with this place and was currently looking for a new job when one day I was bartending and a very young-looking girl came. She hands me her out-of-state ID and I can tell that it is fake. I politely tell her that I can't serve her alcohol and explain that in this state we don't legally have to accept out-of-state IDs, blah blah blah. She was actually very understanding and there was no scene or issue. Her other friends arrive and they move to a table, and I inform their server about the fake ID. It is around this time that the assistant manager, who had been drinking Bloody Marys at the bar next door all morning and then napping in the office, came over. He then starts telling me that I don't know what a fake ID looks like and I don't have the right to refuse service and how stupid I am. He then tells me I have to serve the girl. I inform him that I have the legal right to refuse service and he cannot force me to. Anyway, I go home and post on Facebook about my day, and then include a photo of when I was managing a liquor store holding a device of medieval defense made out of all the fake IDs we had confiscated in 1 year. Also, a crown. The next day, I was called in and let go for refusing to cooperate with management and what have you. TLDR, got fired for posting a sweet picture of me wearing a crown and holding a shield of fake IDs. Not me, but the company I work for. A prospective employee just passed his interview and was told that all he needs to do is pass a drug test and a physical and he would start on Monday. The company Facebook guy found the new hire on Facebook and the guy had just posted 20 minutes after the interview, "Crap, anyone know how to pass a drug test in 24 hours?" I was younger and an idiot. I posted something on Facebook about wanting to go home and play The Sims so I could create telecommunications store I worked for on it and then slowly kill off all the customers. I was working a late night shift in a mall and forgot our new coworker had added me on Facebook days before. Joined a game studio alongside a guy who just finished his philosophy degree. He felt that the game's official forums were the best place to discuss whether disabled people would be, quote, of as much value as pigs after a post-apocalyptic event, and if they should be simply slaughtered and eaten, all using his company account, of course. I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't have the mental or physical capacity to give this guy the verbal beatdown he so desperately deserves. And probably physical beatdown too while we're at it. I was let go from the nation's third largest insurance company for what were called offensive tweets. Apparently, someone with my similar name was tweeting vulgar things to comedy accounts, and they brought me into HR and terminated me. Yes, I sued for wrongful termination so I could finish getting my MBA. I was once passed over for a job because I barely use Facebook. They straight up told me that they couldn't trust me because of how little info was on my page. For future reference, I'm sorry employers that 90% of my Facebook page is related to StarCraft and/or miscellaneous gaming. I'm sorry that I don't get drunk and post embarrassing photos of things you could fire me over. My personal life is my business and not Facebook's.
You must construct additional profiles. We require more discreditable posts.
A company I worked for had it written into their 7-page contracts that you were not allowed to even reference said company on social media. Anyone in breach would be fired instantly. There's a page on Facebook called We Hate Blank that's currently one of the world's biggest corporate hate pages. It all started when someone working in our call center posted online about how much the customers suck. They began something of a war between the staff and customers posting on employees' walls and vice versa. The company was/is a major player in its market, essentially had a monopoly, and there was a noticeable drop in sales that year. All in all, around 20 people were fired. I work in a hospital, and there was a police shooting in my area a couple of years ago, and multiple officers were brought into our ER. One officer was dead on arrival, and a number of idiot hospital employees posted condolences on their Facebook pages with the name of the officer before the family was officially informed. If memory serves, 7 or 8 employees were rightfully fired for that one. It's amazing to hear all of the healthcare blunders. I work in an ICU and saw a pretty messed up violation of patient privacy. A nurse was trying to contact the wife of a patient of ours, but somehow got his ex-wife. The ex-wife lost her mind on the nurse and started demanding information. When we finally got a hold of the wife, it turns out that the patient has a restraining order on the ex-wife due to a bunch of issues and told us not to release any information. We marked the patient as confidential so she wouldn't be able to find him. The ex-wife kept calling us saying she knew he was still in there, what room number he was in, and other information that we never provided her. We were wondering how the ex-wife knew all of this, and how her name was listed as the next of kin. It turns out that her friend worked in the admitting department in the same hospital, and she was the one that A, updated the contact information, she apparently checks on his patient file constantly, and B, kept logging into one of our systems and released his health information, such as tests he's had, results to lab work, and reading history/transfer/discharge reports once the ex-wife told her that he was admitted to our unit. They apparently did this all the time whenever the ex-wife found out that her ex-husband was in our hospital for any reason. After a couple days of proper investigation, the admitting clerk was let go and fined for improperly accessing patient information/release of information. She basically killed her career for her friend, as we basically only have one healthcare entity in our area. Not me, but a girl on my Facebook worked for the postal service in my town. She posted on Facebook how she wanted to slit her boss's throat and went into some pretty gory details. Then, about 5 hours later, she posted another status about how the feds showed up at her house and that one of her coworkers had showed her boss the status and she was now fired. She's obviously really dumb and trashy. I had to fire an employee for a tweet he wrote about a customer. He tweeted, "Customer's full name would be a great name for a gay adult film star." I found out about it when the customer's lawyer called me the next day threatening action. Turns out the guy worked for the local newspaper and obsessively searched his name on all social media. A little over a year ago, a bunch of employees at my old job got a rash. It wasn't contagious, our blood was clean, and the doctors were confused. I took steroids from day 1 and had it for a little over 2 weeks, I believe. I didn't even have it as bad as a couple people. Everyone continued to work, even though some people had it in exposed areas. Employees were itching and talking about it, but management did nothing. Even the manager had it, but the owner didn't, so he didn't care to take any action. Well, I posted a picture of my rash on Reddit and gave absolutely no information on where I worked. It got to the front page of r/WTF and a coworker saw it and obviously recognized it. He showed people because he thought it was funny, but there was a coworker already out to get me and she was close with our manager. So they told the manager that I had posted the picture on Facebook, which obviously would have been a big deal. So the manager told me to leave, but said she would have the owner meet with me. I knew as soon as I got home that she wasn't going to tell the owner to contact me. But I was already planning to quit the next weekend, so I didn't bother to meet with him. I am not working at a place that allows the majority of their staff to get a rash and not investigate it. I should probably add that this was a restaurant. Not me, but my mom's ex-boyfriend. He was a waiter at a very elite restaurant and had normally expected very nice tips. Some guy left him a $5 tip for an over $100 bill and he got angry and posted the customer's information on Facebook. He got fired the next day. Wow, this blew up. It seems some people are making some pretty bad assumptions. So he was actually a very good waiter. High-end restaurants really wanted him. It probably went to his head at some point because he started to pick up a drinking/staying out late after work habit. He started having some issues with my mom as well, and they became roommates only. My mom moved out and he got really stressed, and I heard from his prior manager that he started getting strikes at work. He also frequently ranted on Facebook about bad customers. A while later, he posted the customer's info on Facebook and was fired. From what I know now, he's got a job at a bar, but is still drinking. He wasn't a bad guy by any means. He just started losing himself and making really bad choices. My mom still keeps in contact with this family, but from what I hear, it's still bad. I had to fire someone for one. He was a volunteer firefighter and left for a call, which I allowed. 15 minutes later, someone showed me his 5-minute-old post of him riding quads, saying something along the lines of, "Sometimes you just need to F off from work." That put him on a final warning. He then left because he said his house was on fire. Then half an hour later, his wife tagged him in a photo of him sitting in a kiddie pool in front of the house. The funny thing is, in both cases, if he had simply asked to leave early, I probably would have said yes. To clarify, this was over a few different days, a few weeks apart, and he worked for me, but also volunteered as a firefighter. The fire chief also found out about this and dismissed him from that position as well. This guy had a few issues, needless to say, and honesty was not something with which he was familiar. My dad was in a similar position. The guy asked to leave early, my dad said yes. Then a half hour later, the guy posted that he was in the emergency room. We later learned that it was because he tore his urethra after he stuck a screwdriver in there. Edit. It was a Phillips. Oh my god, why is that so important to everyone? Okay. Reddit? Hi. It's me, the guy reading these posts. Don't stick things in your dingling where they don't belong. I remember reading about a guy who shoved a caulk gun up there one time, and I still cringed just as hard. So dingling havers of Reddit, please take care of yourselves because I don't want to have to read more about your trauma. It costs $0 to be nice to yourself. My female friend, 18, was DM'd through Twitter by the news presenter, 37, of our city. He was talking about her beach pictures and how she is really pretty and how they need to get together. She ended up telling him that it's pretty ridiculous that he's trying to get with her. He lost his job later that week. The only real reason he lost his job was because he used the Weather Channel's Twitter account. Oh, this happened to me many years ago. I was on the job a week at a law firm and had to ride with one of the female employees to the UPS store. She was a terrible driver and almost wrecked multiple times. I posted on Facebook, 1 week on the job and my coworker is trying to kill me. Worst driver ever. The next day, I was called into my boss's office with the girl sitting there with an expressionless look on her face, and there was a printout of my post. It was awkward and they fired me on the spot. All of my account information was also set to private, so they figured out a way to check my activity. Former Chipotle manager here. As many of you know, Chipotle gives away free crap on Halloween. So it's a mandatory weekend for everyone to work. Well, one of our employees called off that Thursday saying he had swine flu. Right. Of course, he posted pictures of his weekend partying on his Facebook, upon which he was friends with our kitchen manager, general manager, and district manager. Per company policy and common freaking sense, you can't return to work from serious contagious stuff without a doctor's note. So he shows back up on Wednesday acting all fine and saying the doc cleared him. Oh, but his mom threw his release note away. Too bad, buddy. We need that crap or you can't work. Since we didn't know when he would have it, we only gave him 1 day on the schedule anyway. So then his mommy calls me and asks why he can't work. I ask her, if she went to a restaurant and found out a cook hadn't proven he was clear from having swine flu, would she eat there? She saw my point. But it's not his fault she threw away the note. They were remodeling. I asked, why can't the dog write a new one? Well, he went on vacation. Couldn't the receptionist or a PA get them something? She huffed and hung up on me. The next day he puts on Facebook, Dear Chipotle and managers, instead of cutting hours on someone, why not grow the freaking balls to fire them outright? Suck my dingaling. Pretty easy to let him go after that. I got fired from an internship for posting on Reddit before. It was a very small environmental engineering consulting firm. We were doing work on a site that had lead and arsenic contamination on it. The site was very dusty, and if it didn't rain for a few days, the dust would often kick up and blow onto the street next to the site, which happened to be the main road in this semi-smallish town. Someone mentioned on Reddit, in a totally unrelated way, that they were from this town. I made a mention of the contamination and told the dude that if he ever saw dust coming off the site that he should contact the engineers which were housed above one of the local bars. Apparently, this guy didn't really want the site to be redeveloped at all because of the already high congestion in the surrounding roads, and he called and complained and mentioned my post on Reddit. The company was so small, it was obvious it was me who posted it, and I fessed up about what I had said, and immediately deleted the post. Even though I didn't do anything illegal or even remotely immoral, I was fired because I was seen as a liability. Screw that. People deserve to know if the dust they're breathing in could give them cancer. I moved on to a different field, marine biology, and haven't even remotely looked back. Content warning, good old-fashioned racism ahead. A girl I know was a nurse at a hospital and got fired for posting things on Facebook such as, "So sleepy here in the ICU. Will someone please code and give me something to do? Hashtag, is that bad? I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I have to ask. Is it like a Native American custom not to take a dump at home? Is it like an offense to their husbands to dump at home? Every time I go into a public bathroom and it smells like someone died in there, a native is washing their hands. Literally every single time. Like, lay off the Navajo tacos." The dumbest part about it was she was tagging the hospital she worked at in her posts. If you have to start your post with, "I'm not trying to offend anyone, but," there's a good chance you're probably going to offend someone. Or just straight up be offensive under the guise of asking questions. I remember hearing a story about a young teacher in my province getting fired for posting vacation pictures to Facebook. Bikini, margaritas. A dipstick parent or teacher reported it, as any uptight group of PTA mothers would want to defend young eyes from that. "Oh, we can't have our children gazing upon such heresy. Having fun, enjoying yourself, it brings torment to the soul. Oh!" I didn't get fired, but I did get written up for a post on Facebook. It was about 5 years ago at my old job. Spring just started, and it was the first day it was in the 60s. On lunch, I posted something like, "What a beautiful day. Can't wait to get out of work and enjoy it." Well, that didn't go over well. Funny thing is, I wasn't Facebook friends with anyone from work. They had one guy that would creep on people's Facebooks. This is when I learned about privacy settings. He told the boss, and I got pulled in the office. They basically asked why I didn't like my job and why I couldn't wait to get out of work. I was like, it's the first warm day in what feels like 6 months. Of course I want to be outside. The reason I got written up was because I was, quote, on Facebook at work, even though I was on lunch. Bunch of idiots worked at that place. It's kind of surprising how delusional bosses are. "Oh no, he might want to get off work and enjoy a nice day. Call him in! We must investigate what it means to be human!" What happened to you when you were young that you didn't understand until years later, potentially not safe for work? I was in LA at the age of 10 and ended up with sunburn as I am English and not used to the heat. My dad took me to the restroom where we shared a stall, and he helped me take my t-shirt off so that he could reapply after sun. This was pretty painful. I was screaming inside a locked stall, saying that it hurt, so was surprised when a burly guy forced open the door, looking quite annoyed at my dad, who explained correctly what was happening. I grimaced through the pain and agreed as best as possible. Only years later that I realized that burly guy was a top bloke, and that the pain he was trying to save me from wasn't that kind of chafing. TLDR, a nice, bear-like man made sure I wasn't being inappropriately touched by my own father. I found a butt inside my dad's closet when I was 6. A butt. Looking back on it now, it was probably an adult toy, just something he made to look like a woman's butt. Either way, I pulled it out of his closet and was sitting next to it on the couch when he got home from work. I was a lonely kid. Edit, I'm a girl. When me and my sister were around the ages of 8 and 6, we gave our mom a necklace for her birthday. She was about 36 years old at that time. It was a blue/green twinkling necklace, and we thought it was perfect for mom because she loves glitter and jewelry. She wore it at every occasion she had guests for dinner and similar. We were very proud of our gift because she liked it so much that she wore it all the time. Years later, I realized that it was an ugly piece of crap. Really, no sane human would wear this dog collar in disguise. I cringed at the thought of actually giving it to mom. Then it clicked. She wore it for us, so that we don't feel guilty of giving crappy things to her while making a fool out of herself in front of everybody else. I love you, Mom. When I was about 14, a guy who I went to school with had leukemia. He disappeared from school for a while he had chemo, and then came back when he recovered a little. We weren't particularly close. In fact, there'd been a little bit of animosity between us. For no particular reason. just petty kid stuff. But last day of term, as I was walking towards the school gate, he caught up with me and walked with me. He told me he was sorry there'd been tension between us and that he liked me and hoped we could be friends. He died during the summer break, and I realized sometime later that maybe he had known he wasn't going to make it, and that he was trying to make his peace with the world before he went. When I was a little kid, we had a kid in our class named George who was mentally disabled. We had special needs kids in our school, and we wouldn't have them in the same class, but they would share recess with the rest of us. George dressed funny, he couldn't speak very well, and he had a hard time understanding what we were telling him. As you might imagine, this led to a lot of the kids excluding him or making fun of him. My friends and I decided to be his friend. He was a nice kid, didn't mean any harm. He was just a bit slow. Years later, in telling the story to someone else, I remember my teacher explaining that he was quote-unquote Greek, which I didn't understand at the time. Thinking about it, I remember that just like the special needs kids, the ESL kids shared recess with us. George wasn't disabled. He was just a recent immigrant from Greece who didn't speak English very well. Visiting my aunt and her cool roommate Susan when I was a child. Didn't realize until my cousin said something when I was in high school. You mean her roommate? Oh, holy crap. My mom told me that my goldfish ran away. You are now imagining a fish with legs. You're welcome. We had a science fair in 6th grade, and I was doing some sleep experiment or something. Being the know-it-all I was, I referred to my subjects as testees, like trainees, I thought. My teacher politely suggested calling them test takers instead. Years later, it dawned upon me, and I have mad respect for him not laughing in my face. I would have. When I was 12, my divorced mother and I lived in a nice duplex in my hometown. She would go to the city after I fell asleep and party downtown with my aunt almost every night. I didn't know this until I was older. One night in particular, I fell asleep on the couch and halfway woke up to the sound of the front door opening and closing. I saw my mom walk in with a creepy, hooded, shadowy figure close behind her. I fell back asleep. The next morning, I asked my mom who was with her when she came home last night. She looked terribly confused. I told her about the figure behind her, and the color drained out of her face, and she shook her head and told me to stop playing games. That if I kept telling ghost stories, I would invite malevolent spirits into the house. Found out like a year ago that she brought a guy home and made me believe it was a ghost so I wouldn't tell my grandparents. Crafty woman. TLDR, my mother brought a guy home one night and let me believe for over 10 years that I had seen a ghost. Sometimes we would stop at my aunt's work so that my dad could go in and talk to her. I wasn't allowed in because I was a kid and it was an adult place. The only other things that ever got the descriptor adult were adult films, which were not for kids because of all the screwing. So I happily assumed that my aunt worked someplace where all sorts of screwing was happening. Years later, I was driving by and noticed that it was a retirement home. When I was about 4 or 5, we got 2 very important life-changing bits of medical news. The first was that my baby brother was on the way. The second was that my father was diagnosed with acute lymphoma and had about 2 weeks to live. When I was little, I had no grasp of how serious cancer was. My mom told me my dad was sick, but that was it. I remember my mom kept insisting that I spent time with him, but I would always get angry when he got too tired to play or kick me out so he could vomit from the chemo. I remember one night in particular where my school had my first back-to-school night/carnival. They had all sorts of rides and stuff. My dad had just had extensive surgery and had staples across his entire neck. I used to joke that he was like Frankenstein. My dad managed to make it through the big presentation the teacher made to the whole class and their parents, but barely. I thought this was boring, but would be worth sitting through because I would get to go on carnival rides afterwards. But my dad had to leave. He couldn't even stand up. I could not understand how my strong 6'4" father could be so selfish. If he could sit through the boring part, why not the good part? I, to this day, feel tremendously guilty over how I treated him and the tantrum I threw when my mom was struggling to hold my dad up and my dad was struggling just to stay conscious. Fortunately, the doctors were wrong. He made it well past the 2 weeks and eventually beat cancer 5 years later. It took years before I understood how seriously sick he really was. He had gotten down to 90 pounds, but to me, he was still a Superman. We had this gym teacher in elementary school that would bring a bag of apples to class and give the girls one if they'd give him a massage. I was mad because I absolutely loved apples, still do. I thought it was unfair that only the girls got apples, So I told my teacher how Mr. So-and-so would only let the girls massage him for apples, and we had to do sports. I was not an athletic child, so the idea of eating apples versus gym activities greatly appealed to me. I had to go to the principal's office to tell them my story, which was basically, this is bullcrap. Everyone should be getting apples, or no one should be getting apples. Other students corroborated my story, and soon enough, so-and-so was gone. TLDR, escaped, prevented, and ended potential inappropriate abuse from a teacher because I love apples. My dad was a fairly strict guy. Military background, very type A, etc. I was a very outdoorsy tomboy of a girl. As a kid, I loved to find caterpillars and build them little homes and find the best flowers for them to eat, and my dad loved this hobby of mine. So much so, he would encourage my caterpillar hunting, which I always thought seemed a little weird, but I didn't question it. There were a few plants out by our barbecue in the back that he specifically asked me to keep an eye on, because, as he told it to me, this was the best place to find them. My kid brain just thought my dad and I had found a common ground and that he wanted to help. About 5 years later, as my naivete started to wear off, I realized my dad was a total pothead. My brother, who is 10 years older than me, was chatting with me about my new realization one day, and that's when it was finally spelled out for me. Those plants that, according to my pops, were the best place to find my footed worm friends were actually just my dad's pot plants, and he enlisted my help to keep them bug-free. TLDR, my dad encouraged me to hunt caterpillars off his pot plants. I just thought he was trying to help me find the coolest bugs to play with. I'm a redhead, but neither of my parents or my brother is a redhead. So when we were out in public when I was young, a lot of people would ask where my red hair came from. One day, when I was probably 6 or so, my parents told me to start answering the question with, "From the mailman," which I did constantly because people always seemed to react to it. It wasn't until I got to high school that it clicked that the mailman in this scenario had not delivered my red hair in an envelope, but that it had come from a much different package. When I was about 8, I was using my parents' bathroom and picked up a hand towel by the sink, and a plastic member fell out. I already knew what a member was since my siblings and I had watched the hilarious Where Did I Come From sexual education video narrated by Howie Mandel. I thought this plastic member was hilarious, and when my little sister was taking a shower, I poked it in through the shower curtain and would poke her with it. She thought it was pretty funny too. Our mom was horrified to find us playing with it, and when we asked what it was for, she said it was for medical purposes and studying. We were never able to find it again. It wasn't until a few years ago when my sister and I were reminiscing about stupid things we did as children that I remembered this incident and told her, "Oh my god, we played with mom's adult toy." TLDR, found my mom's adult toy and joked around with it. Sister and I didn't realize until about 15 years later what it was. When I was 6, we used to play a lot with Pokemon cards at school. One recess, I left my deck inside the classroom. When I came back, my Charizard was missing from it. 3 days later, a friend from class came to me and told me he found my Charizard outside in a bush. Took me 10 years to realize he stole it from me and then got cold feet and gave it back. When I was 7 and my brother was 4, a man came up to the backyard where we were playing and asked if he wanted to see the puppy in his van. My brother said yes and he started to follow him. I grabbed my brother's arm and screamed very dramatically, "No!" until my parents came out. The man waved at my parents and then drove away. I felt a little embarrassed for, quote, overreacting by screaming no like that. Looking back, there is no way he wasn't a creeper. I asked my mom just now if she remembered that, and why she didn't report him to the police to let them know there was a potential kidnapper in the neighborhood. She said, because he didn't actually do anything. When I was younger, my house was messy, and my mom only ever cleaned on special occasions, and that was only certain rooms people were allowed in. I always thought this was completely normal. We had wine boxes holding up our couch and shoved right up our chimney, which was covered by a fire screen. Our kitchen smelled of mold and rotting food, the benches and floors were covered in the source of the smell and other unidentifiable objects. My clothes used to sit in a washing basket so long after they were washed that they would start to grow fuzz. There was one room beside mine which was so overpacked with rubbish and toys that I could barely crack the door open. It was just filthy overall. No one ever saw this though, and if they did, I can only imagine that my mom would have lost custody of me immediately, and I think she knew that. I lived like that until I was 12, and I didn't really understand what was happening until recently when watching an episode of Hoarders. It's kinda messed me up. I can't sleep unless my house is spotless, and I constantly have panic attacks if I forget to clean something before leaving the house. In kindergarten, I had a best friend named Daniel, and we played with toy dinosaurs and traded them all the time. January comes around, and I invite him to my birthday party I was having at my house. He never showed up that day, and my mom told me that day he wasn't going to be able to make it, as well as he wouldn't be able to come to school again. Little kid me was like, okay, I'll see him later. He died in a car crash on the way to my birthday party. Edit, thank you for your support and kind words. To the people saying this didn't happen or other rude things, this did happen, and I feel sad every single birthday I have. To the people asking did I get his gift, I did not. But I still have the last glow-in-the-dark Triceratops that he gave me. Really, how heartless do you have to be to just assume a story somebody wrote on the internet is made up, especially when it's about something as emotional as this? Like, I get it, you could easily lie about something for clout or internet points, but come on man, you can't just assume something like that. I hope I'm not late to the party. When I was about 6 or 7, I was looking for bugs in my backyard when I came across a super rare and cool praying mantis. Naturally, I scooped it up and put it in my bug container. Later on, I was looking for more bugs when I found yet another praying mantis. Lucky day. I was super excited and put it in the container with the other praying mantis. Both of them stood in there dead still and just kind of bobbed around like praying mantises do. I came back a few years later and was appalled by what I found. The bigger mantis standing there as still as ever right on top of a praying mantis head and legs. I was super spooked. Was that mantis a killer? Did the smaller mantis fall apart or explode? What happened? It really weirded me out for a while. I'd say about 10 or so years later, I found out that the female mantis eats the male after screwing. I still don't know if I'm an accomplice to a murderer or a world-class wingman. In my adolescence, telemarketers frequently called our house. My parents instructed my sister and myself to respond to questions like, "Is your mom or dad home?" with, "She or he's in the shower." Well, one summer day, when I was 6, we got a telemarketer call. After I explained I was only a child and could subsequently not conduct business for the household, he asked, "Is your mom home?" I said, "No, she's in the shower." "What about your dad?" "He's in there too." It was not until years later that I realized his sudden embarrassed laughing was caused by me accidentally making this guy think my parents were getting it on in the shower while their poor innocent son was home. I lost one of my teeth when I was 7 years old, so I was excited to get money and stuff from the tooth fairy. I put the tooth under the pillow and I was ready to get my prize for losing a tooth. The next morning, I woke up and the tooth was gone, but no present. I went and told my dad about how I just got scanned from the tooth fairy and he was like, "Oh, the tooth fairy had to run fast, so she gave me the money to give to you." He then pulls out his wallet and gives me the $2 that the tooth fairy gave him. I was so happy, but still wondered why the tooth fairy was in such a rush. My mom was really intent on having my younger brother believe in things like Santa and the tooth fairy for as long as possible. Once she forgot to replace his tooth with money. I asked her about it, and in her infinite wisdom, she had me, I got home before everyone else, make a letter from the tooth fairy to explain why I was late. I said that 2 kids had gotten into a fight and knocked every single one of their teeth out, so she ran out of quarters and had to run home to get more. I was quite proud of the story, and he bought it. But he started having doubts, so he left a note with one of his teeth asking for proof that the tooth fairy was real. My mom wrote him a letter back and taped a small lock of black hair to it. All of my family has blonde hair except for my dad, but he keeps his very short. He bought it hook, line, and sinker, and didn't find out the tooth fairy wasn't real until well after he lost all of his teeth. Had that note on his wall for years. Turns out the hair was from the single black spot on my grandma's dog that was living with us at the time. Pure genius. When I was 6 and my brother was 4, we used to walk to our cousin's house, which was 2 houses down. One evening, we asked our mother if we could go over and she said yes and lets us walk over by ourselves. While we're walking, this car drives up to us and asks if we knew where the nearest McDonald's was and if we'd like to come with him. I told him we weren't allowed to eat McDonald's without our mother's permission and turned to get her to ask if we were allowed. She was already running outside to get us when the car sped off. I was around 15 when I was reminiscing with my family and she brought it up. Creepy realization. When I would stay at my grandmother's house, I had a bunch of VHS tapes about dinosaurs and stuff that I wanted to watch. Sometimes I get to watch them, but only if my grandpa was home. Meemaw always said, "You'll have to wait until Peepaw gets back. I can't work that VCR." She also had all her soaps recorded on tape, and many times I saw her record them without my grandpa being home. She feigned incompetence so that she didn't have to watch my dinosaur movies, and I never realized it until I was an adult. It is the wise woman who plays the fool. Meemaw, you sly fox. I never understood that not everyone had people drop bags of groceries on their steps, while the people just rang the bell and drove away. Dawned on me as an adult that we were poor. Then, I looked back at the old pics and noticed all the signs. Tiny Christmas tree in the background, disappointed faces on Christmas pics, no vacation pictures. Dang it, I'm gonna try to avoid having my kids live that way. The other part of that is I didn't realize how stressed my mom always was until I got older and realized not everyone's parents freaked out weekly and slammed doors and peeled off in their car, leaving their kids alone and scared. I specifically remember one incident where my mom, brother, and I went to the grocery store, and while we were all walking to the car, my mom dropped a gallon of milk and it exploded all over the ground. My mom started crying, and my brother said, "Don't cry over spilled milk, Mom," kind of chuckling. I didn't understand at all. Now, looking back, it hurts me to think how hard my mom was trying to keep everything together. She passed away at age 51 when I was 18. She had a rough adulthood. I live my life now hoping to become what she wanted me to be. She made tons of mistakes, but she was there for me on her own, and she tried so hard. All you teens, take notice of how your parents act when they think you're not looking. You might be surprised to find that they are very stressed and working super hard to make you happy, oftentimes with only frustration to show for it. I was cleaning chickens with my grandparents when I was a kid, probably about 10 years old. I was pulling out the insides, and I found what I thought were 2 eggs that were growing inside the chicken. I got all excited and showed my grandma and told my mom about it when she picked me up. I noticed that they both had smirks that seemed odd when I told them about it. Years later, I thought back about that time and realized that it was a rooster, and those were his nuts. Sounds like somebody found out why roosters go cock-a-doodle-doo. I'm sorry. Okay, this one's a wild ride, so stick around. Carjacked with my cousin. I was 12, she was 16. Gun pointed at my head and everything. At the court hearing, they were caught, my lawyer person lady asked if I was aware that the 4 men who carjacked my cousin and I had intention to kidnap us, as the police found duct tape and rope in their getaway car and they fessed up to it. That was a heavy bomb dropped on me while I was testifying against them, but I never really understood how lucky I was until I was older. Since everyone asked why they changed their minds, I've heard that the leader of the group decided against it because we reminded him of his kid sisters. Since it was technically my uncle's car and happened in my uncle's driveway, they were the ones responsible for pressing charges against the men, who were pulled over for speeding down the freeway just as 2 detectives arrived to ask us questions. The car was totaled. Tattoo artists of Reddit. What is your most, are you sure, tattoo you've been asked to do/have done? I actually refused to do this one. An 18-year-old girl came in wanting her boyfriend's name on her lower back. She had never met him. She was his prison pen pal for a month, and he was being released in a couple weeks, and she wanted to get it to surprise him. No judgments on ex-cons or 18-year-old girls, but I got the impression the relationship wasn't going to last. That's not the good kind of surprise. Imagine if you're chatting with a girl on OkCupid, and it's going okay, so you meet up for your first date, and she says she has a surprise for you. So you're thinking, awesome. Did she buy me a gift? Or maybe she wants to show me a cool place when we're walking through the city. Or maybe she just wants to give me a surprise hug, because everyone likes surprise hugs from cute girls. Nope. Turns out she's tattooed your name on her body. I'm the type of person who thinks quote-unquote red flags are typically overreactions because everyone deserves a fair chance. But this right here, this is a real freaking red flag. That's on fire. And someone is waving it frantically while holding a megaphone in their other hand, into which they are screaming, "Run! Run if you want to live! Get the heck out now!" An artist at the local tattoo parlor I go to tattooed a guy's ball sack, all orange with a scary face on it. The guy referred to it as a sack-o'-lantern. Now fellas, we need to talk. You're not going to be able to use this for 11 months out of the year. And for the 1 month you get to use this on, it's for 1 day only. I just got done watching a YouTube video on the worst Christmas gifts of 2022, and some of those gifts were Christmas-themed Christmas gifts. I just want you to think about that before you decide to get something holiday-related permanently tattooed on your body. A guy came in and got his wife's name covered up with the portrait of his new girlfriend. My coworker used part of her shirt in the picture to cover up the name. Then, 2 months later, he turned his now ex-girlfriend's portrait into a demon. I started working at another shop and in came the same guy with a third girl and they were getting matching tattoos on their hands. When I walked to the front and saw him, he totally pretended he didn't know me. Dude came in and asked me to tattoo a portrait of his girlfriend. Only, the portrait was a duck-face Snapchat selfie. I jokingly suggested adding her holding the phone, taking the selfie, but he thought it was a great idea. They've only been dating 6 months, and he didn't tell her he was going to get it. He came back a month later to add her name above it. My ex-tattooist, I didn't know that was a thing until now, tried to convince me to get a broken condom with the word whoops above it. Obviously, I declined. He ended up tattooing it on his own upper arm with his son's birthday below. Mate had to tattoo a picture of Bill Cosby to a dude's back in the mid-2000s. Poor guy probably regrets that now. Zip zap zoobity bop! Was in booking a tattoo one day, and a woman came in to buy her soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter a tattoo. Owner and tattooist says, "Sure, we can sort something out. What is she wanting?" Mother says she wants to get the Playboy bunny on the inside of her wrist. Artist refused and said, "I don't want to be responsible for something so cliche and visible on such a young girl." There was an argument, but the woman leaves yelling she is going elsewhere where her money is good enough. He had strong views on neck, face, and hand tattoos. Didn't stop him from doing a fast food character orgy on a guy's back though. I know a lot of tattoo artists who will flat out refuse neck, hand, and face tattoos on a young person if they aren't tatted up already, because that foolish/impulsive tattoo can create some major waves down the line from getting a job to be flat out profiled. And, like a bartender, they ultimately reserve the right to decide whether to do the tattoo or not, just like a bartender doesn't have to serve someone if they aren't comfortable with it. Definitely had many of these. One really great dingling-related one recently. I work at Vic Market Tattoo in Melbourne. If you know the area, you know it's one of the older Melbourne tattoo shops. With that history comes a lot of older customers who ramble on about their experience of getting tattooed here over 20 years ago, which is why they inevitably come back. This older gent, easily in his 80s, comes to the front desk and points me out from way down the back of the shop. "I want to talk to that guy." Confused, I meander up to the front to be met with a blush of embarrassment. He stumbles into his request. "Now, I'm not here to offend you or to make light of the wonderful work you do, but I do have a strange ask for you," he states. Here's where it gets weird, and I really feel like he could have led with a sentence better than, "So I was watching this young chap take a whiz the other day, and he had just the most beautiful bee tattooed on the head of his dingling, and I wanted to request to have the exact same bee tattooed on my dingling." Slightly taken aback and slightly amused, I tell him we can definitely do that, but that there are extra costs involved. Once I told him the price, he almost fell over, didn't respond, and mumbled his way out of the shop. Never will I forget. "I was just watching this young chap take a whiz." I tattooed a swear word on a woman's hip. Just the swear word. She still loves it, but it makes me really uncomfortable when I think about her at the beach. I also had a friend want me to tattoo his girlfriend's name in Old English on his arm. I said, "No girlfriends." He was mad because I was his friend and should do it. I said that's exactly why I wouldn't do it. If they don't last, I'm still his friend. It's incredibly hard to tell someone you won't do their tattoo because their relationship might not last. Newsflash, he got our competitor to do the tattoo. Breaking news, they aren't together anymore. Another guy, when I first started out, wanted to get the fascist hunter image. It's a cartoon guy clubbing a swastika. Even though it's an anti-racism image, he still would have looked like he had a giant swastika on his chest from 10 feet away and would spend the rest of his life explaining it. I decided to not do the tattoo. Guy came into the shop I work at wanting a cover-up of a previous regrettable tattoo. Pretty normal until he casually mentioned it's on his dingling, and it's a red rocket. None of the dudes on the shop wanted to cover it up or even see it. Only person who stepped up was one of the female artists. She was like, "I don't think I have a dingling tattoo for my portfolio, so screw it, let's cover it up." The only possible way to cover it up was to add so much black work, so she freehand drew a tuxedo onto his schlong. Dude ended up with a dapper dingling, and he was happy with it. Weirdest day at work ever. I know this guy who wanted a quote-unquote cutie mark on a guy's butt. A cutie mark is the marking the ponies have on their rear in the My Little Pony series. For everyone wondering what his cutie mark is, I don't remember. It was his own special mark. Last year, while doing a guest spot in Portugal, I had a guy come in while he was on holiday for his stag party. The guy wanted all the names of his friends tattooed on his butt cheeks. 13 names on each cheek, and 3 of his mates wanted to sign their own names. Sure, buddy. Sure. I was a shop girl, so it was my job to get everything set up for the tattoos. I had a couple come in and want each other's names tattooed on them. Okay, no problem. At this shop, we had a rule that anything involving words has to have the person sign a copy of the lettering to make sure everything is spelled correctly. So they write their names down, the artist draws the lettering, and I give them the copies to double-check spelling and sign off on it. The woman looks at the man's name. He wrote down his name to give to the artist and says it's spelled wrong. We double-check, and that's how he spelled it, and he looks at it and says it's right, and they argue about this. I go back and look at how it is spelled on his ID, and sure enough, it's spelled wrong. So he decides maybe it is spelled wrong, and the artist redraws it. On all his paperwork, he had spelled his name wrong, the way he had written it for the artist. His name is pretty common. I think he just really didn't know how to spell his name. This was a couple in probably their late 20s, early 30s with a few kids together. The guy's name? Jeffrey. We had this lovely exchange student come into the studio for about a year to get all sorts of piercings, and then the day finally came that he turned 18. So he asked to sit down and had a chat with him about what he wanted. Now, the way he asked me made me think that it was going to be this big, elaborate design. He asked for a maths equation on his foot. He wanted 3 + 4 = 8. I cautiously asked that he knew that that was the incorrect answer to the equation. His response was, "Oh yeah, I know. I just think it'd make a funny tattoo." So yeah, that and another time I tattooed Scooby-Doo and Shaggy on a guy's bum cheeks. A man came into the shop my husband works at on his 18th birthday and got a pentagram with a goat on the front of his throat. First tattoo in a very visible spot that is satanic. I don't know that kid, but I'm pretty sure he's regretting that decision. My husband refused to do this tattoo, but someone else in the shop did. On another note, my white trash biological father had "Let's Screw" tattooed on his hands when he laced his fingers together. I never knew what they said when I was a kid. I finally realized it at his funeral. I'm pretty sure he got it in prison. I've tattooed a guy's current wife's name on him. In the same session, covered up his previous wife's name, and he also showed me another, different previous wife's name he had on him. He didn't want to cover that one though. She must have not been that bad. Okay, that's a lot right off the bat. We also had this couple come in all the time to get tattooed at the first shop I worked at. The guy would come in sometimes with a side girl and buy her tattoos, sometimes with his fiancée. After they were married, his fiancée wanted me to tattoo their wedding date on her wrist. I felt really weird trying to talk her out of it while not feeling like it was my place to tell her about this guy's behavior. I ended up doing it for her, and a year later, she came in to get a red line tattooed through the date. TLDR, don't get names or dates unless they're your kids or dead. One of my dad's friends got a Gary Glitter tattoo back when he was popular, regretting that big portrait of a kitty diddler on his arm now that he is 60. Friend wanted angel wings tattooed on her back and asked me to go since I was the only person she knew with tattoos. We walk into a pretty well-known tattoo shop in LA, and she explains to the artist what she wants. As she explains, it gets even more elaborate with the wings starting to decay the further down her back they went, and the artist shows us some pretty sweet wings he'd done before. He explains how it will be done. He'd do the outline first, and after a few weeks, she could come back and he'd start the detail work. Fast forward to 3 days later, and she's topless lying on his chair/bed, and he's laying a stencil down. He asks her what other tattoos she has besides this one, and she tells him that this will be her first one. Tattoo guy's face drops instantly, and he starts saying how he's going to end up tattooing some of the most painful parts you could tattoo, the ribs mostly. And he asks if she can handle it. She says yes, and after a little more talking, it happened. She cannot take the pain at all. She's crying and gripping the cushion like she's about to die. Artist looks at me and his face reads like, is she really going to do this the entire time? After half an hour of tattooing with the occasional break, he says he can't deal with her screaming in the shop, so he stops. He had probably 10% of the outline done on the right wing. We leave with another appointment set so another person could re-help her with the tattoo and make it something smaller. I didn't go back, but she went with 2 female friends, and from what I heard was another 10 minutes of tattooing, and she had a nice wave outline on her back. I know a girl who tattooed a Wu-Tang W on her upper thigh. Only after she finished and looked in the mirror did she realize that she had done it so that she could see the W, but to everyone else it looks like an M. R/no regrets. During the Twilight craze, a mother brought in her 14-year-old to get vampire bites tattooed on her neck. Little holes with blood streaming down. We refused and they got angry. A few years later, I saw that girl in public. She must have gone to a crappy shop. She had 2 quarter-sized black dots with red strings all the way down her stupid neck. Well, my friend recently got tang, the Chinese word for soup, tattooed on his ankle. He'd been planning it for like 3 years. He reportedly did his research to make sure they didn't tattoo, quote, truth or beauty or some other bullcrap. Honestly, if I had the guts, I would get fried rice tattooed on my arm because I love fried rice. There was an 85-year-old woman who came into my tattoo artist shop saying exactly, "How would a freaking skull with freaking daggers and fire?" My artist said, "Heck yeah!" And now she's an 85-year-old grandma with skull and daggers on her chest. I've had 3 tattooists ask me, "Are you sure?" All because of the same tattoo. Long story short, I lost a bet and ended up with a dingling on a surfboard tattooed to my butt. Well, it turns out this is a great conversation starter and always gets a giggle from everyone who sees it. But the tattoo itself isn't great, so I'd like to tidy it up and make it look better and less scratchy. Every single tattooist I've asked has looked at me like I'm crazy. One went as far as to tell me a young woman should not have surfing genitalia on her butt. I tattoo eyebrows specifically. I've had a few clients come in and not know it's a tattoo. I had an older woman come in with her paid deposit and think that I was going to wax her eyebrows. She thought the deposit was the price of waxing eyebrows, $110. I felt terrible. I waxed her eyebrows, showed her how to fill them in with a pencil, and then refunded her deposit. Other than that, there's the usual freak out before starting, so I'll always ask, "Are you sure?" I know a girl with a camel tattooed on one of her toes. It's only an outline, and it's hidden most of the time, but I do wonder what motivated her to have a tattoo with the theme of camel toe. Not a tattoo artist, but the last time I got a tattoo, I overheard the guy in the stall next to mine getting a tattoo of 3 spanners along his forearm. His tattoo artist was asking, why spanners? Like, was he a mechanic or an engineer? Nope, dude was a chef. Maybe he wanted to be a mechanic? Or it was a hobby or something? Nope. Dude had always wanted to be a chef and loved his work. Then why the spanners? Turns out, the dude just really likes spanners. Spanner equals wrench, often known as spanner outside of North America. Today I also learned what a wrench was. This has been a very informative topic. She thought that cazzo cancro meant screw cancer in Italian, while it really means dingling cancer. Not a tattoo artist, but my dad has a terrible tattoo on his arm of his and my mom's name. Years ago, she told him to get something around it to make it look a little nicer, and he came back with a dolphin on his pec. She wanted screw it on the inside of her lower lip? I need to know, is that a viable place to put a tattoo? Like, pain notwithstanding, you'd think that having a tattoo on the inside of your lip would be impossible? Like, you're not from Wakanda. That's not gonna work. But I don't know. Tattoo artists of YouTube, let me know in the comments if this is a really, really, really stupid idea. My artist had a drunk guy come in that wanted a raw T-bone steak on one pec. Artist told him no, but guy insisted, so artist finally let him make an appointment to come back in a few days when he was sober and talk about it. Dude actually came back and was still insistent that he wanted the steak. Artist told him, okay, he put together some sample art, and dude would come back the next day, still thinking this guy would change his mind and not show. But dude comes back the next, and he loves the art that artist shows him. Artist figures, why not? And he does it. I saw the photo of the finished tat in his portfolio. It's exactly as described, just a big photorealistic raw T-bone steak, like what you'd buy in a grocery store. This is a Ron Burgundy moment if I've ever heard one. Not an artist, but when I was in high school, a kid got a 7-Eleven Slurpee tattooed on his inner forearm. He showed it to the guy who owned the 7-Eleven nearby, who was so impressed he gave him free Slurpees for life. Hey, let's go! My 2 best friends got Born to be Wild in black with red flames right above their Johnsons. Now, since they are hardly ever professional snatch punishers, their pubes just mask it. But in college, they would trim and use it as a party trick. It worked. Lots of girls wanted to see it. Maybe like 3 or 4 BJs came from it with the aid of some distilled potato water. But I told the story goes of them getting it done. The 2 dudes, with cleanly shaven pubes, getting Born to be Wild above their Johnsons. And their artist says, I recommend Bad to the Bone. It's funnier. I worked in a tattoo shop for a few months, learning to be a body piercer. The owner was this gruff older guy. Anyway, this girl walks in and wants a tattoo of a daisy on the top of her foot. It was her first tattoo. The owner tried for a good 10 minutes to talk her out of it, explaining how painful it was to get a tattoo there. She basically told him, "Shut up and do the tattoo, old man." So he did. She got about a half-inch line done before she screamed and kicked him. She started bawling her eyes out about how bad it hurt. She left with nothing but that half-inch line as a trophy to her own stupidity. Not a tattoo artist. I have a friend who got a tattoo of a nightclub name on his butt. It began with the hashtag, and he gets free entry for life. He's the only guy I know who shows his butt to the bouncers, and instead of getting kicked out, he gets let in free. Oh man, my dad and my stepmom got tattoos the day before they got impulsively married in Vegas. My stepmom, she got his last name tattooed on her inner forearm about 3 inches long. My dad got an enormous, full-body portrait of my stepmother in lingerie. It covers his shoulder and almost all of his upper arm. I was about 13 at that point, and I was livid after they came back and showed us their new ink and their rings. At least they're still married now. Distraught dude came in wanting a portrait. I asked to see the reference photo that he wanted to get tattooed. He showed me a bunch of low-resolution webcam shots of this lady from a dating site. I assumed he was trying to impress some online chick he met, so without telling him that was a horrendous idea, I instead said that it wouldn't work due to the low quality of the pictures and the heavy filters she used. Later learned that the pictures were of his ex-wife from her new dating profile. He was having a really hard time getting over her, so I convinced him that this probably wasn't the best way to get over someone. He ended up booking an appointment to get his son's portraits instead, and then didn't show up for the appointment. So, happy ending? I knew a soldier in my unit who wanted Florida tattooed on his chest, where he was born. Tattoo artist put on the stencil, asked him to check it out. He looked in the mirror and declared it was backwards. The artist began to explain how mirrors work, and he quickly responded with, "Look, I can see it's backwards. Just flip it, idiot." So the artist obliged. When he proudly showed off his new tattoo, the amount of laughter that ensued embarrassed him into wearing t-shirts every second of every day for months. However, he redeemed himself by getting the word cavalry tattooed on his back because, I'm sure you guessed, he was in the cavalry at the time. However, he once again screwed it up by getting the word cavalry tattooed on his back, which is a very subtle but very important difference. Both tattoos were big, bold block letters absolutely impossible to cover. Guy was an idiot in front, behind, forwards, and backwards. My friends called me Banana Man in high school. First sentence in and I'm already regretting typing this. Screw it. I had butt-length blonde hair that I manic-panicked totally yellow. When I'd get high, it was often the scene of me with my hair over my face looking like a banana melting into the couch, hence Banana Man. It also made an easy signature that I unfortunately can't draw here, so it stuck. Fast forward a beat and you have me, in the army, no more butt-length hair, drunk on my first Phase 3 outing. I'm feeling homesick and tired of the bullcrap, a typical moody new army recruit. I stumble into, yes, I was stumbling drunk, a tattoo parlor outside of Fort Lee, Virginia, and ask for a Banana Man tattoo. A lady there says she'll do it. Her excuse is she has fantasy items she wants to tattoo. Last month, she got to tattoo a toaster on someone, and now she gets to mark banana off her list. She draws me up a cartoon of a smiling banana half out of its peel, and my drunk butt loves it. Bam! Before I know it, I'm back at the barracks rubbing ointment on my upper arm. Now I'm in my late 30s and have had to explain this dumb freaking tattoo far more times than I'm comfortable with. I've got a few more tattoos now, and I love them all except this dumb, stupid, drunk purchase that I can't get rid of. At least when you drunk buy crap off of Amazon, you get to return it or throw it away. I'd love to cover it up, but it's that perfect size and shape that all my ideas amount to big black dot on the upper arm. I've even gone to a few tattoo parlors and had artists tell me it's either going to be a big black dot or you're going to see some of it. TLDR, don't get a tattoo if you're drunk. And don't trust an artist who's willing to tattoo you if you are drunk. I remember bleeding a lot. Reddit, what's a secret your job keeps from the public? Olive Garden server, you can get 3 free wine samples every time you go. When we present yours and someone else's profile in front of an employer at the same time, a lot of times, one of you is there to make the other look better. About a quarter of all the gonorrhea we find is in the throat, and a new study suggests transmission from quote-unquote deep kissing. Not necessarily a secret, but it's challenging to get other providers to do testing for all sites at risk. Just a reminder, whenever you go for your routine STD testing, make sure every orifice that's touched a pink part gets swabbed. Worked in a no-kill animal shelter. The thing is, no-kill still does mean you have to put animals down sometimes. Especially behavioral issues are terrible. When is a dog too dangerous? Can you rehome a pit bull with a bite history? What if they get too dangerous for staff to handle? Especially when it gets out that we have to put a specific animal down and all those Facebook warriors start rioting and calling you names. It's not like we make those decisions for fun. I work at a cemetery, and I can confirm that the concrete or metal vaults that the casket goes inside of in the ground do not keep the caskets from getting wet. Actually, they do the opposite and just hold water inside. The sales team will always try to paint a nice picture in your head of what the casket/vault combo will look like in the ground, and it's a complete lie. One of many lies in the cemetery and funeral business. We claim to be a leader on the technology front, but we are literally running off of Excel macros with random codes that no one knows how to understand/correct without causing the entire company to crash. A lot of companies, even Fortune 500 companies, are just houses of cards. Shiny on the surface, then you get inside and you realize how much of the organization is dependent on Excel. You learn they're dependent on legacy systems akin to DOS, and you learn that things are constantly breaking, and the only thing keeping the whole company from imploding is people constantly fixing the things that go wrong. I work at a major chemical plant upriver from a major city. If it came out how old, run down, and poorly maintained literally all of the equipment that we use to make sure that hundreds of millions of gallons of contaminated water don't leak or straight up spill into the river, the EPA would shut down every plant on the river. However, the EPA is aware of how inefficient and poorly disposed all our waste products are. The plant I work for has a yearly budget dedicated to paying fines. Your child's school report is probably word for word the same as half of their class. There's only so many ways you can say, works hard but needs to focus on accuracy. At the hospital, they have secret employees who walk around to make sure doctors and nurses sanitize their hands before entering and exiting a patient's room. You'd be surprised how many don't follow protocol and end up getting written up in a day. The chicken bites aren't cooked to order. The fries look darker today not because they're extra crispy, but because the shift manager was too lazy to change the oil, which should be changed every 5 hours. The house sauce is just mayo, ketchup, paprika, and pickle brine. The sticky patch outside the bathroom might be pee. Worked in a library for 2 years. We don't make diddly squat from your book or DVD fines. They're designed to be a deterrent more than anything else. And under the right circumstances, we're very amenable to just making them go away. If you had a tough week and couldn't make it to the library to return your books, we could work something out. Laughing about being too lazy to bring them back / forgetting you had them entirely, yeah, those fines aren't going anywhere. That being said, libraries don't like to penalize people who can't pay their fines. If your kid has so many fines that the computer locks him out so he can't do his homework, we're usually more than happy to help you get logged on for the day. We want to give students the assistance they need, but if a school is the one to test / diagnose a child for autism disorders, then we are the ones that have to pay for all the follow-up medical help. All of our videos are made by the same people in the same building, and we just changed the text / logo. All of the interviews are scripted too. They literally feed the lines to the subjects. Because they don't want to pay us a fair wage or give us benefits, we also don't have to sign anything, meaning no NDA. Dodo / Thrillist / now this. Wow, I literally just got fired. It's not because of this post, I just think the timing is hilarious. We bill by the hour, but no one who works in this industry monitors their time closely. I work in a public library. Sadly, since we're open to all, we get a lot of indigent customers. In this day and age, that means a lot of opiate users, many of whom shoot up in our restrooms. We've had many overdoses, most of which are treated quickly and effectively by administering Narcan. However, that's not always the case, and some people are either beyond saving or are found too late. In 2019 alone, we've had 13 deaths. Security and the EMTs are always careful to make it appear that the body being wheeled out is only ill, so as to not freak out the patrons. The actual number of deaths is even hidden from the staff. I'm friends with a few of the folks in security, which is how I know so much about it. Edit. Obligatory holy crap, I did not expect this to get so much attention. A lot of people have mentioned installing blue lights as a deterrent. That's been looked into and discussed in depth. Unfortunately, what we've discovered is that they're largely ineffectual. When they can't see their veins, they just jab themselves until they hit pay dirt, and all it really does is increase the number of infections and abscesses. The bathrooms are going to be remodeled in the next year to make them less user-friendly, so to speak. Many people have asked where this particular library is. I'm not going to say. However, the fact that people have guessed San Francisco, Philadelphia, Denver, and even Canada illustrates that this is a widespread problem, and that we're sadly far from unique. Thanks to all the other library workers who have shared their stories below, it's unfortunate that libraries are forced to deal with social issues outside the scope of our normal operations, but I maintain that libraries are a foundational pillar of civilization. We now have several full-time trained social workers on staff to help deal with the situation and have effective programs in place to help people get their lives back on track. Most of the time, all it takes for a free upgrade is being polite. My manager will literally ask us, are they being nice? Unless it's the weekend / a show night, then we literally do not have the availability. Yes, even if it's a show that you are not personally interested in going to. For everyone asking what I do, just assume it's like this everywhere, because it usually is. I'm a special education teacher, and the amount of injuries people sustain while working in this field is staggering. I teach high school, and the kids can go until they are 21. So most of the violent students are adult-sized. We get concussions, bites, broken wrists and arms, scalped, as well as inappropriately assaulted by students who will grab you by your breast, pull out their member, and start pleasuring themselves. By the way, I like my job very much and enjoy working with the students. However, there is little public knowledge of how dangerous the position is. We're supposed to be teaching information literacy, but none of us really checks to see if our student sources are legit or not. Edit. A lot of people are commenting about Turnitin. We use SafeAssign. Those are only capable of flagging for plagiarism. What I'm talking about is checking to see if when a student cites a source for a claim, if that source actually said it, and if that source is at all reliable. There's no software for that. The longer I'm in engineering, the more I know that we don't get the design right so much as we just go with the best we have the moment we run out of time or budget. Goodwill has their own landfills for things that don't sell. Things sit on shelves for weeks with continuous price decrease, then one last shot at selling at the outlet stores where everything is priced per pound. Also, I was just saying that because of the title. Don't get me wrong, the programs and community work they do is great. Municipal worker, we do actually work hard and care about the city, and it's hard on us when people stop/call to yell at us without getting all the facts, and we know we can't really defend ourselves. Most of the time, you are reaming out a laborer who has no control over your taxes or which street is getting paved. Fellow city utility guy here, y'all motherfuckers have no clue how hard city workers actually work for you, how many people come in late at night or on holidays to fix shit, or how fast we actually do respond to problems. I'm sorry your crumbled curb in front of your house or whatever didn't get fixed this year, but we literally have 20 people for the entire city, and they are busy making sure you have clean and safe water 24/7, 365. And now for something completely different. If you're polite and it's the end of the day, I will give you free baked goods I made earlier. Delivery driver, we add 10 to 15 minutes on the estimated delivery times so we seem speedy and not seem late if we're stuck in traffic. We also charge delivery fees that most people don't notice or ask about. Yeah, I'm going to share my personal experience with this one. Some of my friends in need needed someone to spot them for delivery, so I would pay for their food. Grubhub is especially bad about this. I once paid double what my friend ordered because of delivery fees alone. In a perfect world where people are actually paid fairly, a $14 sandwich combo should not be $28 because of delivery fees. I used to work for a pesticide company spraying flies on farms. Some of the poisons we used were so strong that 1 pint added to a 500-gallon tank of water and sprayed could knock flies right out of the air immediately and was just as toxic to birds. In fact, we were told if we ever accidentally spilled a bottle of stuff on the ground, we should contact the EPA to clean the mess rather than try to do it ourselves. Ironically, by fall, the flies had developed such a resistance to the poison that the only way it would kill them was if you drowned them in it. Would still kill birds though. One last thing, it was an organic pesticide that could be absorbed through any unprotected skin of the human body. I worked there just 1 year because of this. I don't have a job, but back when I was 12 to 15, I would sometimes help out with the family businesses, which was selling coffee and twisted chips. When we first started, the thing that attracted people was that we would always have baked goods up for grabs, and everyone loved it. The reality was that we all bought it from Costco, put it in different packaging, and played it off as if we made them ourselves. This went on for 2 years within the business. Not my industry anymore, but banks would often make decisions that were probably technically illegal about which houses to repair. I currently work at a drug and alcohol rehab. Alcoholics Anonymous has an abysmal success rate if you measure success by continuous sobriety over a significant period of time. And that is how AA tends to measure it. But because one drink is considered failure, a lot of people drop out of AA out of shame, and it takes them a long time to get sober again, if ever. I've seen people with 20 plus years of sobriety beat themselves up and feel like failures over one night of drinking. Various harm reduction interventions have higher success rates. Harm reduction strategies measure success by drinking/using less often, in smaller quantities, and more responsibly. If you were pretty messed up all last year, but you're sober often enough to show up for work most days this year, that's success. Here's the big shocker. Most problem drinkers and drug users recover on their own without treatment. By recovery, I mean learning how to have a functional relationship with alcohol and drugs. I know a few people in our community that were court-ordered to rehab and/or AA years ago and stopped going as soon as they didn't have to anymore. They aren't 100% sober all the time now, but they go to work every day, they have happy marriages, they take good care of their children, they don't get arrested, and they don't get behind the wheel drunk or high. I'm not saying 12-step programs are worthless. Some do stay sober the rest of their lives and are happy. I think that's success, but it's not the solution for everyone. Unfortunately, rehabs that use different treatment models tend not to receive government funding. Courts tend not to refer defendants to harm reduction. And AA unfortunately perpetuates the myth that permanent sobriety is the only alternative to prison, the madhouse, or death, and that AA is the only place to achieve permanent sobriety. We tell customers that we have a supplier we get our parts from for repairs. Amazon. Our supplier is Amazon. Maybe not the public, but they'd probably be shut down if OSHA or the FDA found out. Current job at an HVAC company. My bosses in the office know that about half their employees, mostly supervisors, are doing drugs. From red-eye to hard drugs. Out on the road, on the roof, wherever. Bosses in the office might be doing drugs, and they even let us know every year about the annual drug test, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be random. Might not be. Still sketchy with regards to the above. Not like, you guys know what time of year it is, I hope you can pass. More like, the drug test is in 3 months. That's probably enough time to pass if you stop now, without actually saying anything that could implicate them. Also, they don't care if we're safe. They just want the jobs done because they overbook them and need us to move fast. One guy fell off a ladder from 25 feet. He's been doing physical rehab, they refuse to pay workers' comp for him, and they are trying to get him to come back to work when he literally shouldn't be doing anything other than lifting a cup for a drink. I've had multiple times where I want to put my harness and lanyard on because the roof is 30 feet or more from the ground, and my direct supervisor for that week gives me crap and tells me to hurry up because it's a waste of time. Most of the supervisors on the road don't wear the required safety gear when they should. Supervisors don't give a crap either. They just want to move fast so they can keep their numbers up. Guarantee if I got seriously injured, they would ask if I could still work, not call 911 to help me. Edit. I apologize in advance for how long this is. I got hurt today. Nothing major, I think. I had to take 2 6-inch and 12 to 15 feet hoses apart because we were leaving to go home. My supervisor, standing 6 feet away, sees me struggling and doesn't help. They were stuck pretty good. So I got angry. All the crap I dealt with this week ended up in me using all my strength to pull one of the hoses up to free it from the other one. It came up, and the metal end that connected it to the other hose smacked me in the arm, causing a huge bruise and popped a line of blood vessels right below the epidermis, and it started bleeding, but not profusely. This normally wouldn't bother me. I have a decent pain tolerance. Except the bruise is located on the part of my arm above where the tendons to your fingers are. I tore the rest of the setup down with one arm due to me not being able to touch 2 fingers together, let alone grab something. He didn't ask if I was okay or needed help. He just looked at me after I yelled, "Ah, frick!" and walked away and off the roof. Yes, I know this is my fault, not looking for sympathy or anything. Crap happens. Just an update on how crappy these people are on the job. Burger King worker here. The ice cream machine isn't broken. It just needs cleaning, which takes a long time. Cap. Stop the cap. Right now. I know this is anecdotal evidence, but come on. How many times have you gone to a Burger King or McDonald's or wherever, and the ice cream machine is quote-unquote broken every time? I'm advocating for corporate transparency. No, better yet, I'm advocating for ice cream machine solidarity. No ice cream means the world suffers a little bit more because of you, Burger King. Because of you. Lots of professors are winging their lectures, and showing up to office hours really does help your chances of a good grade. A former adjunct can confirm. Although, to be fair, those who do wing it generally know the stuff well enough that it's not an issue. I did it a couple of times for whatever reason, and it always ended up very poorly, so I pretty much always prepped. A lot. And yes, showing up to office hours really does help. The caveat is that you have to show up and show that you care and that you are putting in work. I've had students be surprised that I didn't bump up their grades because, after all, they did go to office hours. Once. At the beginning of the semester. For a very simple question. I've told this story before, but I had a class my freshman year that, honestly, I started skipping. It was early, the class was notoriously difficult, and I was having trouble grasping it. It was divided into 3 parts, 1 test after each third, and then a final overall. And for the first 2, I pretty much never went to class. First third, I didn't give a crap. Second third, I had a surgery on my foot, and it was tough for me to get across campus. After the second test, where I scored somewhere around a 20%, I realized I screwed up big time. I went to her after class and was like, look, I screwed up. Is there anything I can do to pass this class? Needless to say, she was not impressed. She said, all right, if you come to every, and I mean every class, and every single office hours, you might be able to squeak out a pass. Well, I'll be darned if I didn't go to every office hours, except one that I missed with the flu, on crutches, and worked my butt off to learn a semester's worth of material in a month. When I took the third test, I got the highest grade in the class, just shy of 100. She had mercy on me and let me retake the second test due to the surgery, and I aced that one as well. She told me that she was impressed with how quickly I grasped the material, and out of every student she ever gave that ultimatum to, I was the only one who actually followed through. Going into the final, I calculated that if I scored 100% on it, I could just barely get a B-, which honestly was more than I deserved given the way I ditched class all semester. I passed the final. When I checked my final grade, she gave me an A for the class. That taught me a valuable lesson about putting in the effort and going to office hours. Not at current company, but former one. Everyone had to take additional coursework on business ethics and anti-corruption laws because a subsidiary was found bribing officials to sell the company's products. A clinical trial for Parkinson's failed because of serious adverse events, resulting in at least 3 deaths related to the product. It's now being reformulated and will go through clinical trials again as an arthritis medication. Another clinical trial failed because it was found to be toxic for Asian blood cells. They had originally tried to bypass this by excluding Asians from the trial. Just to be clear, not all pharma companies are like this. There's always a few bad apples. If you get a call from a telemarketing or research call center, you need to specifically ask to be taken off the call list for them to stop calling. Don't be polite and make excuses. Don't mention that you don't have the time. Don't mention the time at all. Don't even just hang up. All of those will often have the company assume on a technicality that you could technically take the call at a later time. Just straight up ask to be taken off their call list or put on their do not call list. You didn't hear this from me. Not my current job, but I used to work as a front desk agent in hotels. Hotels can and do book more rooms than are available. Most systems allow sites like Expedia to book the hotel to 102%. Expedia bookings are the lowest priority. If you don't want to get bumped, book from the hotel's own website. Also, be aware that at midnight, the booking system rolls over to the next day. If you need a room after midnight, call the hotel. If you're a regular customer who doesn't tip your delivery driver, your order is never going to be a priority. I work at a university facilities department. My colleagues actually really do care about the students, student research, and opportunities at uni and beyond for students. This shouldn't be a secret, but I am constantly and consistently impressed by how much our electricians, custodial staff, EHS, you name it, care about the students excelling and achieving. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.